So now I'm so happy to be welcoming Beverly Kyer again to First Five, Alameda County. Beverly's done numbers of trainings for us before in the past, and we're so grateful to have her here. She is a speaker, educator, consultant, certified compassion fatigue specialist, and author who has devoted 16 years to training human service providers and family caregivers, helping them employ self-care, recovery, and neuro-physiological regulation strategies. By understanding the risk factors and prioritizing techniques, they can rebound and remain effective and available to help those impacted by traumatic life experience and at-risk populations. Beverly's training and coaching provides engaging, applicable, and practical tools for sustainability and wellness. And we're lucky too that Beverly is here with her colleague, Sarah Newton, who is going to help provide some support and information for you all here in the training. We're so glad, Sarah and Beverly, that you're both here. I'll let you take it away and we'll be working together to provide this training. Thanks so much for being here. Sarah.
Thank you, Beth. I am just going to give you a little overview of the materials that were shared with you so that you have an idea of what you have access to and the resources that you have available. So you should have received a copy of the participant handbook. The participant handbook is something you can use to follow along today in the presentation, or you can reference it later. It includes the assessments that Beverly will, it all resources towards the end, session activities, and a self-care plan, a few different worksheets and things that you can use to support you after the training. We also are providing a copy of the PowerPoint slides that you can use to reference from today's presentation. Is a free copy of Beverly's book, a digital copy of Beverly's book, Surviving Compassion Fatigue, Help for Those Who Help Others. And that's available as a PDF or as an e-publisher file. If you have like an e-reader or Kindle, you can upload it into that or download it into that platform. So those are the resources that we have for you. I will also be sharing another document in the chat box that has some links to ways you can connect with Beverly and stay in touch, and ways you can continue to be part of the compassion fatigue community. And so I will be sharing those as well. And let's see, is there anything else? Oh yes, and if you have any follow-up questions after the training or you need something from us, I will include my email in the chat box as well. And it's assistant@beverlykyer.com, but I'll share that in the chat. So I think that's everything I have for you this morning, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Beverly.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Leah. I'm so glad to be with all of you this morning to talk about subjects that's dear to my heart. I find it so critical in our work, especially all of us in the child welfare communities. But to begin, I would like to begin this way. I want us, as Beth said, to be as interactive as possible. So I do really encourage you to use the chat. Use the chat to not only to answer questions. I'll ask you from time to time, are there any questions? And you could quickly put in a Y for yes or N for no. Put that in quickly regardless so that we could catch questions. You may just have an out and out question you want to ask me. And so put that into the chat and Beth or Sarah will catch that for me and let me know somebody has a critical question. You may have revelations. Sometimes we just have those aha moments when you listen to something that connects with you or resonates with you. Put that into the chat. And you may want to say it out loud. We'll for time's sake, we'll make some decisions about that. But if you really want to say something, and no doubt somebody else wants to hear it, just go ahead and say, I need to speak. I need to say, open up. And we will regard that. We'll catch that for you and give you time to do that. But let's begin this way too. I like the fact that even though we have had so many restrictions over the COVID year, and we are doing everything by Zoom, I've always been a little bit concerned about the levels of isolation and this not feeling connected, and I want us to feel connected. So I would like everyone to go up to that little view thing at the top right and click on that, and where you see gallery, I want you to click on gallery so we could see each other. We could see faces, and I want everybody to just take a moment to unmute yourself and shout out and give some greetings in some ways. And let's see some smiles. Go ahead, y'all. Just connect.
Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
Beautiful.
Good morning.
Good to see you all.
Good morning.
You're looking good. Looking good. All right, thank you for taking that moment to do that. That's important to do. We'll do that also at the end of the meeting. Beth very wisely said we want to have a little debrief time to kind of process and kind of talk about some takeaways from today. And so we'll again share this way by just seeing each other and just really engaging as much as we can. So with that in mind, I want to open up the presentation and begin today's training, which is, and I need somebody to shout out and make sure that you can see it. Tell me that you can see it.
We can see it.
Okay, good. We're talking about surviving compassion fatigue through an ACEs aware lens. Compassion fatigue, many of you may have been in my classes before. Beth certainly knows, is like the most important subject in my life, having been somebody who worked with veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, children suffering with cancer and leukemia, and children in the child welfare services. Whatever, in every aspect of abuse, neglect that you could imagine, you know the work, you know the challenges. But I was also somebody that while I was passionate and committed to that work, I was just flew out of my bed to do it, knowing that I was making some difference in the lives of children and their families, never counted the cost. Never really realized or even was trained to know that there was an impact on all of us by absorbing the struggles and challenges, the crisis, the victimization that they face. And so it really took a serious impact on my life. But when I survived that impact on my health, I was missioned in my heart, my spirit, to come back to the field and to train all of you, wherever I can. And I do work now I've in like 23 different states around the country to talk about compassion fatigue, the impact of your work, the cost of caring for those that we work so diligently to serve, to help, to support, to protect, to advocate for. That's my subject. And then some years later, many years later, I met the ACEs program. I had some idea about ACEs, had no idea until it was an opportunity to sign on to an ACEs as an ACEs grant recipient. But when I understood the effects of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, on the health of children and ultimately transitioning to the health of them as adults, I was really startled and became married to my work in compassion fatigue. And so that's why I'm excited and I'm honored to bring this training to you today to look at compassion fatigue, but through an ACEs aware lens. Let me go ahead and point out early for you, there are those of us in the fields of these services that may have also had some early childhood experiences that have impacted our lives too. And if that be the case, I want us to recognize and make that connection. But we want to talk about the importance of understanding ACEs, screening for ACEs, being aware for ACEs, having early detection of ACEs so that there can be interventions and supports and resources to help prevent some of the worst health impacts that you could imagine. And so that's what we're going to delve in today. At any point, stop me, send a note in the chat box to say, stop Beverly, I need some clarity on this. Say more about that. So let's communicate with each other. The learning objectives for today are these: to define the experiences of ACEs. I'm going to give you a graph. We're going to look at the picture of what they are. Look at the health disparities and toxic stress that affects the physiology. I was always interested in the neurology, but I'm also combining that with the neuro-physiological impacts on the health and all the biological mechanisms in the human body. That's critical, but we're going to look at that. We're going to see it. We're going to understand it more clearly. We want to understand yours and theirs vulnerability to traumatic stress. A lot of people, a lot of grown folks in particular, maybe even teenagers, they don't like to think of themselves as vulnerable, but let's be real. And no matter how powerful, dynamic, strong you are, we're in bodies and minds that could be injured, could be fractured, could be hurt. That's important for us to understand. So let's be okay with vulnerability. And I'm gonna tell you why it's important to look at that and be more honest about it. It's not weakness. It's not weakness. It's just a fact of the human condition. But if you don't acknowledge your vulnerability, you never do anything about it. And this is how you set yourself up, as I did, to have a serious health injury, a serious health collapse. But now I recognize my vulnerability and know that I have to take care of myself, protect myself, concurrent. I want you to write that word down, concurrent. That was my learning when I had heart failure twice in my role as a case manager in child welfare. I didn't understand that I was supposed to do me concurrent with doing the children and their families, and I want you to get that. We also want to learn how to be resilient in the face of overwhelming and emotionally intense demands. What I'm really talking about here, you're facing it. You step into it every day. Every morning you step into those demands, those challenges, those crises, those upsets, whatever the case is, expectations on you, but it's intense because it's a pilot, but just kind of keeps coming. And we do reach a point of overwhelm. We just do. But there's ways, there's techniques, there's strategies, there's methodologies, which we'll go through, that let you know that you could reset, that you could re-regulate, that you could readjust yourself, you could decompress yourself and get yourself back to a healthier level of functioning throughout the day. And let me say this too, I want you to stop waiting for the end of the day. I want you to stop waiting for Saturday, the weekend, or some magical holiday before you do the next thing to take care of yourself. I want you to do something, and I'm jumping ahead of myself, called accelerated recovery. And matter of fact, several times during the day, I want you to stop and detox, decompress, regulate. That word, I'm going to repeat that over and over again, but it's important to do that, and you can do it in the moment. Understanding also the role of toxic stress in your health, in your risk. We're going to outline that. I'm going to give you a graph, pictures of all of those ways that it shows up in your health. And actually there's 6 impact areas for toxic stress in your body, for compassion fatigue in your body mind. We want to know how, in looking at those methodologies and strategies, how do you create regulation in the brain and in the body simultaneously? Matter of fact, when you think about stress, it's a body-mind thing. It's not one thing gets affected and the other one does not know. It's simultaneous. Recognize early warning signs. This is critical. Sort of the same thing as when we're looking at ACEs, to have the purpose is to have early detection. I want you to have early warning signs of when yourself and your colleague, and mostly your colleague, because you'll recognize, somebody else will recognize you being under stress long before you recognize it. But I want you to have a list of what those indicators, warning signs, or you could say symptoms of compassion fatigue, if you will, what they are, so that you could offset them, address them, circumvent the worst aspects, the worst effects of compassion fatigue. All along with that too is to be able to create a work environment that promotes a kind of self-care in the culture of how you do your work, increases the morale, promotes the opportunity for more effectiveness in how you work. The accountability piece, I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit later. The accountability piece is how you give somebody permission to notice you long before you notice yourself, so that they can say, okay, come back down, before you get too far out there in your stress. But you could do that. Now, we would think that because we're on Zoom all the time, and many of us are not on site in the office as we would be face to face and see each other. I'm saying to you that you can still do it on Zoom. You could tell when somebody's speech is pressured, there's something is wrong with the coherence or the sequencing of how they speak, and the expression or the tension in their face and their body and their manner. You can see it. If you know your colleague, you can see a little shift, a little decline in their energy or whatever. And I want us to take the responsibility as loving meddlers and say something. Cool. I could look at Beth and she say, I'm fine. I said, no, you're not. So, I know that right away. And then I want to say that to her. I said, let's take a pause. Let's just get a cup of tea and let's talk about what's going on here. What's coming up for you. I want us to take that responsibility, because I want to keep emphasizing that you can decrease, you can head off, you can mitigate the intensity of the stress that somebody's in if you intervene and say something. So you can just make them aware to say, yeah, right. Whew. Let me calm myself. Let me slow it down for a moment. That's all I'm asking you to do. You have no idea how that kind of buffering is helpful and supportive. And we also want to connect with the examples of compassion fatigue. Many people talk about secondary trauma, and many people talk about vicarious trauma, and sometimes they talk about it as if it's interchangeable or it's two separate things. But in truth, secondary trauma and vicarious trauma are the clinical terms for compassion fatigue. They are. They are. So I want to define that. I want you to know the difference in how they manifest, what the experiences are. And I want us to make those kind of connections. And also, some of us have post-traumatic stress disorder. If we've ever been, and I think most, if not all, to some extent, been in a situation that was threatening to your own well-being, your own safety, then you have a degree, an element of post-traumatic stress disorder. Those memories, those experiences don't really go away. Even if you're not thinking about it, the body remembers. The body always remembers. And the body keeps a score too. Matter of fact, you're racking up points. Say, okay, I done told you, I'm tired, I'm distressed, it's always kind of doing that. And it's kind of informing us with things called somatic complaints. So I want us to learn to be self-aware. And then there's burnout. I want to make it clear how different burnout is from compassion fatigue. It's not one and the same. Matter of fact, most people attribute everything when you're getting figures-eight and you're kind of coming to party, you're kind of fracturing, or you're just absolutely overwhelmed. They say burnout, 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 but it's a different manifestation. It's a different way that it shows up, and we'll make that distinction. So if there's no questions, I want to move on. And we're going to talk about ACEs. We're going to talk about ACEs. Our efforts in ACEs are to address and prevent the significant risk and damage to the health of the children that we work with. We want to prevent it. There is a significant risk. Incidentally, somebody has said to me before, this is another good motivation for really doing this, is that the children that we don't save now become the adults that we'll need to rescue later, because it doesn't go away. It only increases, it only doubles, it only compounds. Does that make any sense for you? So our point is to change and save lives by helping the providers. That's you, that's us. Understand the importance of screening for ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, training them to respond to trauma-informed care so that they could mitigate. In other words, that word means to reduce the intensity of what the children are going through that will impact their health in a very, very significant and serious way. That's our role. Now, let me say this too. Some of you in the audiences may be people who become screeners for whatever your role is. And if that be the case and that's your desire, then ACEs provides a way, and I'm pretty sure it's at the end of this presentation. How do you get in touch with the ACEs folks so that you could take that? I think it's a 2-hour test. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah. It's a 2-hour exam, and I'm pretty sure it's free, so that you could become an actual screener. And then some of you, that's not your role. You will not be a screener, but everybody plays a role, because what you get to do is to encourage all of the key players in a child's life to get the screening done. You get to do that. And I hope that you all take that responsibility, take on that role to explain the importance, explain the benefit, also to explain the risks of not doing it so that you can help those children. Take that role on to yourself. Now there's rationale for screening children and for screening adults. In actuality, when you screen the children for trauma and adversities, as I said, you allow for early detection. And with early detection, then there's an opportunity for creating some kind of rapid response to the resources, the various referral systems that you use, and to impact their life early on, as early as it could be detected. There's an intervention. We like to use that word buffering. Something is done to help the child. Then we have improved their outcomes, their health outcomes. That's important. Now, that's for children from 0 all the way through 21. Do the screening. Yet it's not over, and it's not too late after 21. So let's look at from 21 to 64. It allows for improved treatment of all of the ACEs associated conditions that they may have, people at that age. It offers an opportunity to prevent vertical transmission. Now, this is really important. And this is where I want you to begin to talk to us on the chat. When you talk about vertical transmission, I like to use the term, and I want you to think about transgenerational trauma. Like I said, the child we don't save becomes the adult we'll need to rescue, but understand that the person who goes into adulthood with these issues, they transfer that on to their children. They transfer that on to the next generation. It does not go away. However, they learn to adapt or cope oftentimes those adaptations are not in their best interest. Those are not ways that serve them well. It's usually oftentimes an unhealthy way of coping, an unhealthy way. So you want to break that cycle. You want to break that cycle. So it's never too late to look at the ACE history in adults. Now, I want us to take a moment and let's work together on this. I want us to think of some examples that result in, and it could be your own personal experiences, but result in that transgenerational drama when that shows up. And I'm going to start off by giving you two examples that always resonate with me. Years ago, I was working in a operation outreach with veterans returning from Vietnam with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I asked the Department of Defense, who financed that program, and the VA Medical Center to fund me to bring the children in, because I was pretty sure, listening to those veterans, the atrocities they faced and the manifested behaviors that were there when they came back to home, that the children were in, they were in bad shape. They were in bad shape. But anyway, they allowed me to do some groups with the kids. This Jewish lady walked in ahead of the orientation for the children. And she said, before you see my son, and I want you to work with my son in this group also, I want you to read this book. And she gave me a book called, it was called Children of the Holocaust. And ultimately what the book was really talking about, that the people who had survived the atrocities, the horrors of the Holocaust had different ways of adapting and coping. But whatever those ways were, they had passed it on to their children. And that book beautifully illustrated that. So that was a really, really good learning for me way back at a long time to really look at that. But that's just one example. There's also the issues of people who come from places where they have, or here in America, experiencing oppression and racism. Whatever that adaptation is, it becomes a part of the child. Here's my personal example. My father grew up in a place in the South where people used to ride up. They didn't necessarily always have sheets on, but it didn't matter. They didn't have to hide back in those days. And they would take somebody away, and that person may be hanging on a tree or burnt or whatever horror was inflicted on us. So in his growing up, there was always these safety things. Somebody would be outside, someone holding posts, and they say they're coming, and they would kind of run and go to safety. Now, because of that, when my father is now raising his children, my sisters and I in New York City, where we're supposed to be safe, but he had taught us this because he was always drilling us. We even visited the South from time to time, but he always drilled it. He says, when I call your name, and I don't care if you're reading, doing your homework, playing a game, or you're in the bath, I want you to come. Never, ever say what to me. I want you to come and meet. See, that was from his orientation. That was from his life, that protective mode, that the time that it took to say what could have cost somebody their life. Does that make sense? He drilled us over and over again. Years later, I'm in some shopping center, and could be one of you, and you know how your children be just curious and doing stuff, and some mother called her child, and the child said, what? Instead of coming. Everything in me just came alive, and I just wanted to shake that child and say, don't you dare say what you understand? Of course, I didn't do that because I'm not trying to go to jail, but I want you to say the thing that my father had infused in me became so much a part. I even raised my children like that. That's what I'm talking about. Now that comes from a place of safety mechanisms, but I want one or two of you, or any of you, all of you, to type in, if you will, an experience that you have where there's transgenerational trauma and therefore coping that was passed on to you. And I would like about two of you to open up and share your story very, very briefly out loud. Think of examples where your parents' trauma history was passed down to you. I want two volunteers, real quick. And the rest of you could type.
You can just unmute yourself if you're willing to share an experience.
Be courageous, because everybody needs to hear testimonies.
Growing up, my mom lost her dad really young. And so the rule in the house was whatever you do, just don't upset mother. And they have 7 children. And I have caught myself to my brother in times that my mom has been sick or not doing well or anything about like, whatever you do, just don't upset mom. I don't care if you sneak out of the house, don't care what you do growing up, but whatever you do, just don't upset mom. So that's probably something that was generational, passed on from her siblings and her to me.
It certainly is. It certainly is. Right. And I think as I'm listening to you, I didn't catch your name, but as I'm listening to you, I could think when people need to talk or express their stress, that's already cut that off, that you don't even do that because you don't want to upset the other person. I remember somebody telling me something similar about there was a death in the family, it was an illness that was coming, but the message was don't upset other people, hold yourself kind of stoic, which did not give that person permission to grieve in any way. And that had its serious impact on them too. So I'm looking at some, if you didn't write private, Beth, there's a couple of them.
There's some powerful ones.
Share a couple of them for me.
Yes, paternal grandmother suicided when my dad was months old, and this has impacted how he parented me.
Yes, yes.
My father was a World War II vet. We grew up with lots of transgenerational trauma from his almost 4 years on the front lines.
That's very powerful.
Yeah, my mother is twice divorced.
Transgenerational trauma is everywhere ever since you mentioned it. It's like the don't see the white polar bear, or don't think of the white polar bear. It's like, it's everywhere.
I missed something. Who was that?
Was that you, Genevieve? Yeah, I don't know.
I think somebody was talking to somebody else.
Yeah.
Read a couple of more of those for me.
Okay. Beth. I was always told to hide my emotions whenever around guests, strangers, to make others feel comfortable.
Yeah, and can you see the implications of that, to not be able to have your voice in anything? And it doesn't just stay in those kinds of situations. It transitions into how we do life in general. One more.
Learning to walk on eggshells because I grew up with a schizophrenic and bipolar mother.
Wow.
Another one.
Wow. Yeah. So we get the point, that transgenerational thing. So that means that it's important for you, that being your case, it would have been beneficial if the parent had been able to process what was going on for them so that it could be addressed, it could be helped, it could be buffered, they could get the therapeutic support, not necessarily always from a clinician, but someone that they could just talk to. It could have been a spiritual advisor, it could have been another friend that just had that wisdom to impart something to secure them. But it's never too late for you. Those of you who have adapted certain ways of being because of the messages given to you. I still get upset when kids say well to their parent, to some extent, not as acutely as I did before, because I get where that comes from now. If you can make the connection of where that comes, what the blind spot is, and address it, then again, you reduce the intensity of it. So it's powerful work to do. Never too late to look at ACEs, your adverse childhood experiences. Let's look at some of the areas where it exists. The term adverse childhood experiences come from, there was a landmark study in 1998 conducted among more than 17,000 adult patients. It was done by the Center of Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente. They put this study together. The term ACEs specifically refers to 10 categories, see here, 10 categories of adversities under 3 domains. The domains being abuse, neglect, household challenges. I like to call that dysfunctional households. I like that term because it just kind of explains a lot to me. And these domains, they were experienced by age 18 years, from 0 to 18, and were evaluated in the study. So this is a chart for you to keep, because sometimes we could kind of be in a place where we just see one thing and we attribute a lot to it. But I always believe that as service providers, we should have more or yield to more specificity of what are you looking at? What are you specifically looking at? Where does it come from? So that you could address it where it needs to be addressed. Obviously, under the abuse, there's physical abuse, emotional and sexual abuses. The neglect, physical and emotional. Be clear what you're talking about here. And I want to say this too about neglect, because I think I got this from Brian Post some years ago, that he says sometimes under certain circumstances, neglect, emotional neglect, let me say that, physical neglect could be more damaging or injurious than the actual abuse, because it impacts all of the neural pathways in a child, impacts all of them. So their capacity to survive and come out of that with some healthier ways of being is not necessarily there. Yet there's opportunities, if it's detected, to buffer these things, to address these things. He also went on to say that sometimes the greatest injury to a child after having any of these abuses is what was not said or done by the caretaker afterwards. I can't tell you, years ago in the 80s, I had a private practice, how many grown women and men would come in and they're still really suffering about the abuse that happened. Oftentimes it was sexual abuse or the incestuous kinds of households, because nobody said anything. The mother or father, who was the so-called safe parent, didn't address it. They ignored it, and that injured them in many ways more. It left an internal working message in them that just kind of fractured their life, and it shaped the way that they had interpersonal relationships forever. So this is a very, very powerful thing. Don't ever minimize this. And then the household challenges or the dysfunctional things that's happening here, whether it's mental illness, incarceration, substance, parental separation or divorce. And I like that it said this too, because sometimes too, and I know that's not you, but some people think about dysfunctional households as parents who are willfully and intentionally abusive. Oftentimes, very often, there's things outside of even that parent's experience, or as other people that I have met, their situation was so impacted by poor parenting or the lack of, that they had no way of knowing how to deal with these things. And so parental depression, a parent being emotionally absent as a result of their early experiences, could make this a very detrimental thing for a child. So this is just to give you a picture of having greater specificity of what you're looking at, so you could direct your interventions, direct your services, direct your assessments to what is really, really going on with that child. Any questions? Give me a Y for yes or N for no. Quickly type that in. Any questions?
We're getting lots of no's at this point.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure I'm being clear.
Yeah, I think people are on board.
Good, 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 good. Toxic stress response. I want to talk about that for a while. The consensus of scientific evidence demonstrates that high doses of cumulative adversities, and when I talk about cumulative, I'm saying pile on one thing after another thing after another thing, as my friend would say, serial traumas. It just keeps coming. And from all of those different areas, of those different domains. And when that's experienced during critical and sensitive periods of development, at first 5, y'all all about early development. But when it's happening then without the buffering, which is the protective things, the things that are said, the things that are cared for, that provides a sense of safety and stability from key relationships in their life, whether there's parents or relatives or neighbors, somebody who's pouring into that child to circumvent how they feel, and in the environment, it will lead to long-term disruptions of brain development. Now, I want you to pay attention to that. There's memory imprints, grooves in the brain with traumatic things that happen. Those grooves kind of stay there. The memory stays there, whether they realize it in the way that they could articulate it or not, but it has changed the brain development. It also alters the immune system. All of us, this grown folks and the children too, our immune systems are impacted detrimentally, negatively by the stress that we have. As a matter of fact, the stress hormone itself will knock the immune system completely out. Those children, you know, the children you work with, they're highly susceptible to anything, cold, any kind of illness, things that are airborne, things that are laying on the surface. Understand? And let me back up on something about that brain development. It kind of hijacks the functions of the brain, key function areas of the brain. That's part of what's happening. All the hormonal systems are disrupted. The body, as a matter of fact, loses its coherence for systems to work in some kind of synchronicity that promotes health. The genetic regulatory mechanisms disruption. So ultimately what they are in a toxic stress response, Yet I want to emphasize that you can do something to circumvent this. You could do something to reverse this, whether you're the screener or the person encouraging screening, and then the intervention gets to happen to begin to help this child. So this is the response. Now there are spectrums. There are spectrums of stress. And we're actually, when I first saw somebody made a mention of positive stress, I said, at first that didn't register with me well, that didn't kind of go together. But then there is positive stress. In other words, what that's really talking about, these normal everyday things that we all face. It could be the test at school, it could be exam, it could be the interview for the new job that we're facing. It'll be an important game. I was in an orchestra and I was good on my viola. When my parents were sitting in the audience when my mother was alive, but I'd be stressed, until the thing is really going, and I'm rolling with it too. And I remembered everything in my key and my chording. And then, but initially I'm stressed, right? Or I'm gonna tell you another stress. My father was crazy about school and academics, and that we did really well. And I had this real strict teacher who always said I could do better than I am doing. And I thought I was doing my best, but she said, I'm gonna call Mr. Kyer. And I know she was going to tell my father, and so I'm being stressed, you see. But see, the thing that made it positive is because I knew that he would look at me in that disappointed way, and he may make me spend some more time working harder on my homework to improve it, but I wasn't going to be hurt. I wasn't going to be injured. I wasn't going to be beaten. I wasn't going to lose my house. It wasn't going to be no serious retribution. I wasn't going to be starved. You know what I'm saying? So automatically when Miss Harris says, Miss Kyer, there was a physiological response instantaneously, a moderate to mild. It wasn't no mild because, I didn't like my father to be disappointed. I was scared as heck with Miss Harris. So it was a moderate stressor. So there's a brief activation of the response in my body. My heart rate, I couldn't even breathe. I couldn't even speak. I was stuttering, as that makes sense. Please don't tell my daddy. I even began to cry a little bit. And then but the homeostasis recovers quickly because I knew I was going to be okay after my father's moderate temperate disappointment and maybe a punishment of having to spend another hour on my set. You get the point. That's a positive stress. We all face those. The tolerable ones are more significant. They have a heavier impact. And I want to say when this graph was drafted years ago, this was before what happened on the previous administration or separating children from their families. Immigration in the norm is just the stress of coming into the country and going through all of the processes, and all of those people in the earlier days, they didn't all come here legally, they got married in, so they were worried. Yes, I mean, their grandfather did, and they were worried. So that's the immigration that this is talking about. So this is still tolerant when you're trying to face these things. It could be a natural disaster someplace. You can hear about a fire. We all had this experience last year, I'm pretty sure, because y'all pretty close to where I am. And it was a fire in another town far away, but it made all of our skies orange. And I remember that morning when I woke up, oh my God, I kind of got up and I was thinking about all my stuff that was packed. So again, there was an adaptive thing, but it was time limited. It was time limited to the extent that I was able to get on some kind of call system and learn that the fire was really not here. It was all the way in Vallejo or something like that, or wherever the heck it was, a distance from me. And so I kind of calmed down. But that time limited activation was there, but it caused some short-term systemic changes in my body until I realized we're going to be okay. At least I know what to do. We're not trapped in that situation. So I was able to recover. The buffering effect came in. There was a fire in my home years ago when we were children. And I want to talk about buffering. And this is about parents that are emotionally available. Like I said, my father was one of these people who always drilled and always prepared us for dangers or potential threats as we lived in this world. And we always did fire drills because we lived in one of those brownstones, and there were other people here in the brownstone that may have been more callous about things. So a fire broke out and these people were going down the brown store. It was 4 stories. And they said, Miss Kyer, in there with those girls. We could kind of hear them from outside. And so there was a freeze, there was a response. I was nervous, we were scared, my sister and I. But then my father did something. he came out of wherever he was, a study, and he says, now you'll know what to do, Daddy. We're going through this over and again. He says, you're going to hold on to my jacket, because he wanted his hands free to do this and that and the other and make this decision. You know where the key is. If we got to go out the fire escape, we know where the key is. And if we got to do this. But see, that was the buffering, because what it did is assured us that Daddy was in control. He figured things out and we were going to be safe. But it was his manner, his presentation. I want you to think about that. For most of the children that we work with, you work with, that's not there, that kind of buffering that assures, and so it stays. Now combine that with several other stresses, several other traumas, you end the toxic stress thing. And this, unfortunately, is the state that most of our children are in. The abuse, the neglect, here's those domains, a dysfunctional household is a maladaptive response when it's not buffered, when there's no safety mechanism, when there's no protection that they could count on, there's no sameness, there's no predictability about what the caretaker is going to do or not. They're kind of like on their own. And so the activation of the stress is prolonged and this goes on. And I remember I said that the brain architecture is dysfunctional, is hijacked, and therefore is an increased risk of health disorders. That's what happens. And it establishes a chronic stress response, cholestasis. That's the point. Know where your kids are on this spectrum. Know where they are. Never even minimize this for children in the system involved, because if it's not addressed, it goes to this level and it goes to this level. You get to buffer. You get to do the assessments or encourage the assessments and the screening so that you could circumvent this, you can mitigate this, and move these children back into a place where there's even time-limited stressors, activation. Any questions? I want an example of one of these, particularly the toxic stress. Somebody talk out loud, and a couple of you, the rest of you could type in an example of that. Give me an example of toxic stress.
Feel free to unmute yourself and give an example. I know one from my family is substance use and abuse. Mm-hmm. Ongoing, chronic. People are saying silent treatments. This is great.
Oh, yes.
Mentally ill parent with emotional neglect, alcohol. Let's see.
And Berenice, I see you said silent treatment, and that is an incredibly unnerving thing because you don't know what to expect. And among the things that all children need, among the things, is some level of predictability. But you don't know what's going to happen, so it just leaves you in a very, all of those are toxic stress experiences. Foul language, yes, yes. Child movement.
Place to place with substance use disorder, not regularly or emotionally supported.
Gotcha. Yelling, yes. All right, so you get the point. Again, I want to say, know where the child is. Let's look at the risks. This is a chart you're not to memorize, but take this off and print this out. These are some of the symptoms and conditions. The Office of the Surgeon General has scoured the literature to pull together this list of ACEs, associated health conditions. And this is available for all people in pediatrics and adults also with the conditions. The list of these conditions, if you'll notice, they really start with more of the medical and physical symptoms, appear more the medical symptoms. But, and then the second part, the lower half screen is focused more on behavioral and mental health symptoms. One of the things that we see is that oftentimes as providers, we make associations between ACEs with things like depression and anxiety. We really kind of see that right away, but it can be harder for us, or often we may not realize the association, as the literature points out, to more serious illnesses like cardiovascular diseases, like asthma, like obesity, like diabetes. That's part of what happens with ACEs, unmanaged ACEs. So this is a chart. Print this off and kind of put this up on your screen to just notice. But this is what the screening would kind of look like. And the odds of these illnesses, this is kind of like a ratio of what you would see. But this is for your reference. This is for your reference. Any questions? Yes, no, why, in, any questions? This is a chart for reference.
Lots of no's coming in.
Okay.
People are on board.
And also notice, and you'll see yourself here too. You see yourself here too. These things don't just come out of nowhere. Here is a more concerning chart that I want you to note. Remember I said the adult we'll have to rescue if we didn't take care of, save them when they were children. And this relates to them and this relates to you. That ACEs dramatically increases the risk for 9 out of the 10 leading causes of death. And few people make that connection between illnesses of this nature. When I had my second heart failure, I sat down in a recliner because that's all I could do. And I began to research how could that happen to me. I began to research my retrospective thinking about all the colleagues I had worked with over the past 29 years that had kind of fallen away, and many of them with illnesses. And when I did the research, I found these illnesses. These are the results of unmanaged stress. Unmanaged stress. So I want you to get the point. This is why it is so critical. A consensus of scientific research demonstrates, I don't know why my phone is, excuse me, I'm gonna put it on silence twice. Excuse me, this moment, let me put it down. Consensus of scientific research demonstrates that there's a cumulative, let me write this word down, cumulative, compounded, and exacerbated. Write those 3 words down because I want you to always look at that in terms of where you are at any point of the day. Cumulative, compounded, and exacerbated adversity, especially when experienced during, again, critical and sensitive periods of life, that early point in a child's life. This is the root cause of some of the most harmful and persistent and expensive health challenges that we face in this country, So to do that work, for them to offset this, to mitigate this, to circumvent this is critical. But like I said, if you're already there, it's not too late to do the work. But I want you to think about this. Taking care of compassion fatigue, or this thing we love to say called self-care, is not a cute idea, not an interesting, novel idea of something to try to do. This is the impact. This is the potential risk of not attending to it for them and not attending to it for yourself. If there's any questions out loud, let us know. You need to say something or react. But if you have a reaction to this, a revelation about this, type that in. Type that in. It's critical. Also, print this off and put this someplace so you can just keep this in your mind for a while. Keep this in your mind for a while so that this becomes a natural way of you evaluating and assessing where they are and where you are. Yes. Bishi, cumulative, compounding, and exacerbated. All right. I want to talk about resilience. Interesting word to me. Interesting word to me. It's a word I respect. It's something I hope to see in everybody, but it's something I don't necessarily trust. Can you imagine why? When we work with children, we all want to see some progress. We all want to see what we think, that they feel safe. We want to see them put one foot before the other. We want to see them playing. We want to see them laughing. We want to see them eating. We want to see some sign that our intervention is having some positive outcome for them. And they do that stuff. And so they do look resilient. And people say that they are resilient, and they are. But does that mean that they're okay? Answer that question. Does that mean that the bad thing, the monsters in their history, their adverse experiences didn't go away just because they're moving forward? Answer that. Answer that, right? The ability to withstand or recover from stresses results from a combination of intrinsic factors like safe, stable. Did that even happen? Was there buffering from the caretakers that allowed them to feel safe, that nurtured their relationships from family members and others, whomever? Sometimes cousins and relatives are really careful and caring neighbors can provide that kind of thing. But if it didn't happen, does resilience mean that they're okay? You see? We must advance our understanding of resilience and also having a neuroendocrine, immune, genetic, regulatory domain. So underneath the surface of that smile and maybe those moments of laughter and those moments of being studious or attentive or communicative, this still exists right underneath it. That needs the buffering, that needs to work, that needs the screening so that that could be addressed. This is what we get to promote for each child through our knowledge and facility about ACEs, the testing and the subsequent treatment. This is what we get to do. We not only advance the health of the children, we also break the cycle. Here again, it's a cycle of transgenerational trauma and toxic stress. We get to do that. We get to do that. You be the screener or you be the person that encourages the screening. Respect resilience, look for resilience, but don't get stuck there. There's so much more to do. Any thoughts, any reactions, any responses to that, or any questions? Give us something in the chat to let us know.
Someone mentioned as a reminder about self-care and self-compassion, seeing the health impact and helping children to develop tools for them to access some of that self-care as well. Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's part of the work. Once you know what's going on, then the recommended interventions for it are the tools that you provide for them to work with it, to develop healthier coping mechanisms, to even be able to articulate to the best of their ability to learn to talk and say that this something is going on with me. You know, all of the children, all of us, as the body keeps the score and remembers things, we have those things we call triggers, those flashbacks on some early experiences that you're reactive to. And so they develop tools to even address that or bring that to the people who could help them with it. That's part of it. So yeah. Anything else, Ellen? I mean, not Ellen. That was Ellen.
Someone said, I'm thinking about and pained by circumstances where children haven't had these buffers. Indeed.
Yeah, and many of them not. That's often why they're in the system. And I know we do the assessments of the caregiver to kind of see what they're able to provide, what they're able to, in the ways that they support, in the ways that they parent. And then y'all guys do a lot of work in training them to do it. But you know, if there's anything, and one of my directors said to me, that just because something is supposed to be there in the way of nurturing and caretaking, never assume that it is. I want you to write that down. Just because it was, just because you would do it, never assume that it's there. So that's part of what we assess for, to see, are those children receiving the bufferings? And if they're not, then obviously you're going to find out the resources for them to get it, therapeutic from some other source, or yourselves or your agencies, whoever provides that kind of resource. But yes, I choose to, that same director said to me, kind of infer that it's not there until you're doggone sure that it is. Thank you for saying that, whoever that was. That's a powerful thing. That's a powerful thing. Thank you, Beth, for catching that. Okay, all right. So when you talk about resilience, I think this is leading me to transition a little bit to you. Here's something else for us to do. Here's something else for us to consider. This is something else added to the plate. Now, your work was, it was no joke. It was powerful, it was overwhelming. It was a lot to do. Before COVID, it blew up, compounded, exacerbated, became cumulative with COVID, all the other things that has happened subsequently, the climate, the racial tension, the elections, the insurrection, the this, that, yeah, all this stuff is on you. Let's look at you. You're resilient, and the reason I'm saying you're resilient because you're here. You're still working. You're still doing something. You're still caretaking. But does that mean you're all right? What's going on for yourself? So part of the thing here is for us to begin to assess ourselves and to do that on some frequency. Here you have is a wheel, a circle, dimensions of wellness. it's important that we constantly assess our own wellness. I'm shifting to you. But we need to constantly assess ourselves. There's several dimensions of wellness, and these specified in this wheel. Incidentally, this wheel was developed by SAMHSA. That's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Is developed by them. And what it addresses that compassion fatigue will affect several of our dimensions for wellness. So we need to be aware of how we're doing. And what I like about this too is because oftentimes people say, well, I'm stressed. And so if I say stress, I don't know, I'm just stressed. You know, we don't even focus on where it is, where it's coming from, but it's a multiplicity of things that gets to impact our lives. And so this is looking at those various dimensions, you see. So you could give the various examples, like when a child left or lost, or a child dies, or there's another victimization, or there's another abuse, or whatever kind of form. What is happening to you in the course of that? Not only that, where are you impacted in your own personal lives? This particular design says, think about, are your issues physical? Yes, they probably are. And I want you to learn to be aware of that. But is it affecting you spiritually? Some people said, like, I remember several people saying when there's a death of a child, or even the caretaker. We lost several grandparents when I was working in child welfare, who were taking care of their children, and their health gave out. And some people would say, well, where's God in that? How can they even let that happen? So it tests us, our sense of purpose, our emotional well-being, our social lives get impacted. As a matter of fact, many of us lose significant parts of our social life where we get so disconnected and disengaged from life because we're so intensely focused with the service. Our occupational life, the questions we have, our financial security, stability. These things, is good to evaluate where you are on this scale. So I want some of you to just type into the chat box, what is aching you? Which of these things? Just type in, you don't have to write no explanation about it. You can say it's emotional, and I'm kind of emotionally taxed or emotionally exhausted, as many of us are during this still time of COVID. Or there's some physical challenges, whatever's going on, but kind of say, evaluate where you are, stop and think. Brian Post also said this too, always ask yourself, where am I in this moment? What's on my mind? What's weighing heavily on you? Because if you deal with that kind of specificity, then you could address specifically what is wearing on you, instead of throwing it on to one basket and you're not really doing anything, but trying to bury how bad you feel. I'm seeing those things. Talk to me, Beth.
Yes, emotional, occupational, physically exhausted, finances, physical and emotional again, a lot of physical and emotional, spiritual, socially, emotions, my own and the emotions of those around me.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's in the atmosphere. You're going to absorb it. Those are powerful, all on point. Understand where you are, assess, evaluate where you are, and address where you are. Sometimes put them on a piece of paper. Say, I'm going to tackle this today. I'm going to get on the phone with Beth, and I'm going to have a cup of tea. I got to talk about how I'm worried about this. I'm struggling with this, and I need some ideas how to increase my social life because I just let it all go away. I ain't talked to somebody in 6 months, whatever the case is, but partialize that, break it down so that you can make an impact. And yeah, I saw somebody say something about
fibromyalgia, someone having,
it's more prominent than you even realize.
Yeah.
More prominent because of the stress, more prominent than you realize. So there's another test, and Sarah put this in your handbook. It's an ACEs test. Now, this is a different ACEs. This is American Continuing Education. This has been out for a long time. Matter of fact, I think Brian Post gave us this back in the early 90s when I met him, around 96 when I met him. And this is a compassion fatigue self-test. It's in the handbook that Sarah gave you. And this, we're not going to do this today in time, but this is what I want you to do and make a note. I want you to make several copies of this test. I want you to probably take the test on a quarterly basis. Remind them of this, Beth.
Okay.
And it's going to ask you about 40 questions that you are to answer from both a personal and or professional perspective, because all of that is weighing on you. Even in your life, living in the house with the kids, and you're trying to be the cafeteria lady, and you're taking care of your mother and your father, and wherever you are, but be in the moment, not historical. in the moment, where are you with those questions? And when you answer all of those questions, professionally or personally, there's a grid on the back that asks you to circle certain numbers. And it'll tell you what to circle. And when you finish that, do a sum total of all of the circle numbers, and that will give you your risk score for compassion fatigue. And then do a sum total of all the uncircled numbers, and that will give you your risk score for burnout. And then share it. Share it with your colleagues, share it with your team members, share it with your accountability partners, share it with your supervisor. And I hope you have that kind of relationship. And I tell all managers to make this a part of supervision, not in a pedantic way, just so that you could kind of do a stress ratio of where your people are. So you can say, well, you know, step back, let's take a pause. Maybe you need to, don't do this, but do this, focus on this, and kind of get yourself back, kind of downshift a little bit until you kind of level out and get your regulation back. Use this as a tool. It's in the handbook. Any questions?
Yeah, I just have to say there have been a couple of comments. One saying anti-Asian hate stresses.
Oh my God.
Stresses me more than COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really powerful.
I want to say this too, and I've heard whoever that was, I want to say this too. A lot of people have been saying, because I talked to a lot of people throughout the week in different agencies, this hate attacks on people, knocking down elderly Asian people, or shooting up Asian people. The oppression issues is one of our high factors of stress. And it's interesting that it doesn't have to be directly impacting us. Secondarily, how we feel in behalf of other people who are victimized by hate, whoever they are. That's a major, major stressor. And I'm praying, and I'm so glad that Beth and you folks do that kind of work. Address it. Don't stuff it. Don't let it internalize. Put it out there, scream about it, cuss about it, cry about it, write about it, whatever the case is, but deal with it. Deal with it. I got destroyed initially with what happened to those kids at the border. You understand what I'm saying? I got destroyed about a lot of things. And I was just broken, because I look at YouTube a lot of what people are doing to the Asian community, as several other groups in the Asian Pacific, also other brown communities, other Black communities, other Caucasian communities in areas where they're being abused too. With the attacks on the Jewish community, the attacks on the Muslim, we feel other people's oppression, assaults. That too is to be addressed. That too impacts your health terribly, terribly. So don't hold on to that. Thank you for sharing, whomever that was. Let's look at compassion fatigue. By definition, it is a syndrome that very much mirrors post-traumatic stress disorder. Few people knew that, understood that, but it does. As a matter of fact, the neuroscientists in that field of trauma would say this. They say that the chemical reaction in your body in the execution of this work that you're doing right now is no different than the chemical reaction in the body of a veteran who's in Afghanistan today. Obviously, they have a different level of distress because of the threat, the real daily threat to their lives that could end in a moment. But the chemistry itself, the stress hormone, does not make that distinction. It gets to hit you in the same way. Therefore, you get to experience many of the same symptoms that they have. Ultimately, compassion fatigue is a cost of caring because of your intense exposure to other people, i.e. children and their families, who are exposed to experiencing victimization, trauma, crisis, chaos in their life. It gets you. It's not to be avoided. You can't avoid it, but you always have the opportunity to mitigate the effects. Remember, I said it's the cost of caring, the cost of caring. But let's look at that. I want us to do a little something here. I want us to look at burnout. And I'm going to back that up for a moment. I want us to look at burnout, because I wanted to separate compassion fatigue from burnout. And it goes like this. Burnout really has a lot to do with overwhelming functional tasks in our lives. Overwhelming functional tasks. And it could be all of the administrative tasks that you do, all of the paperwork, all the pressures, all the quality improvement things, you just name it. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of stuff in burnout. And actually, this is what I want us to do right now. I want us to have a little bit of fun. You want to have some fun? Say yes. Say yes. Unmute, unmute. Let's have some fun. Because burnout, burnout has a much better prognosis for recovery, provided we address those things that get on our last nerve. Just those pressures. I used to say toward the end of my direct care services at KC Family Programs and Seneca Center, I said, but one for the paper, I can manage the children and the families. But those things they're there. And like I said, they take a toll, they weigh on us. So I want us to have some fun. I want us to have a nervous breakdown on purpose. You know, Theon, I want us to get some things off our chest. I want you to just go ahead and put it out there. I want you to shout. I want you to scream. I want you to throw a freaking tantrum. Those things that get on your nerves, put them out there. That's what I want us to do. Let me go back a little bit here. And so I want you to shout
me to say
out.
what?
Yeah.
My son miscommunication.
No, I don't want you to talk it out. I just want y'all to yell, all of you at the same time. Yell it into the screen. Those things are getting on our nerves. Have a freaking nervous breakdown. Go ahead, start yelling. What's on your
Paperwork.
Incompetence.
Lack of communication.
Lack of support from leadership.
Stresses, financial stress, social.
Come on, y'all, yell it out. Yell it out.
Healthy, eat right, exercise.
Poor communication.
It just keeps coming. It keeps coming. More and more stuff. The quality improvement.
Weight gain.
Laundry.
They're getting on your nerves. You're living with them.
Grocery shopping.
Not enough motivation.
Wearing a mask.
Yes.
Social distancing.
COVID-19.
Documentation.
You know,
okay, about to get loud in here.
Vaccinated.
The lies.
School.
Not having family gatherings.
Here we go. That's it.
Y'all gonna make me lose my mind. Up in here, up in here. Y'all gonna make me go all out. Up in here, up in here.
Up in
Hey, y'all all
here.
say woof. Get it out. Blow it out. Blow it out. Woof.
Woof. Woof.
All right, check it out. Check it out. It's very healthy to have a nervous breakdown on purpose.
Woo, that felt good.
I know it felt good. You were all into that, Miss Theon. Okay. Okay. Combined compassion, fatigue, and burnout is a perfect storm. Is an unholy union together. It is take you apart. Who's that? Okay. I thought somebody said something. Let's move on. Let's look at some of the causes and triggers. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is some of the things that cause compassion fatigue for us. We all have high ideals for making a difference in the lives of our children. And you could type what some of those things are in the chat box. What did you come to give? What did you want to change? I knew when I came in the field, I was going to fix stuff, make things better, improve the life, give them a different opportunity, a hands up. I was going to do that. But the question is, as you're typing in, what did you come to give? What did you hope to give? The question is, how often do you get to see your good efforts have sustainable positive outcomes? Type that in. And type in this word. What is the emotion that comes up for you when your best is not good enough? Type that in. Type that in. You see? So those high ideals, which I'm so grateful we have, and we're still working at them. But I want you to understand what happens to us when we don't see. And part of my churches, and this is part of my church to you, bear with me, is that oftentimes in our work, during the times that we're working with these children for the period that they're our responsibility, we don't get to see what we would like to see. We want to work hard, turn a page, have a step forward, pull them back from the cliff. We want to see that. We want to hear something to let us know. But when we don't see it, we feel bad. But I want you to know that having been in the system for over 44 years now, I get to meet a lot of those children. They're grown people and they got kids. And you know what they tell me? You know what they tell me? They tell me what they remember about us, what they remember about you. And it's not that we took them to Walmart to get some new pajamas and some toiletries and stuff, and we put them in a new home, and we found some parents that were safe, and we did this, and we paid for graduation, or whatever the services that you provide for them. We don't get to hear that from them necessarily. They tell us how you made them feel. They tell us how you cared, how what mattered to them mattered to you. That's what they tell us. That's what they remember about it. And that's my church to you. So when you don't get to see what you would like to see in the period that you hope to see it, understand that the cards that you hold is that you always get to plant a seed of resilience. And when they're ready, they'll water that and it manifests. That's just my church to you. Be encouraged by that. Be encouraged by that. The other thing, the other causes and triggers is our compassion and empathy. Charles Figley, who's the father of compassion fatigue, he's the person who came up with the construct. That's Dr. Charles Figley. He says that the very qualities of caring and compassion and empathy that allow you to do this work that you do, put you in a direct path of compassion fatigue. There's no getting around it. But he says this too, and this is an encouraging piece or a hopeful piece or maybe a skill piece. He said, if you understand it as a predictable outcome, hear me say predictable outcome of the work that you do, then what is predictable is preventable. The strategy is, the trick is to know that it's part of what's coming. And so we want to prepare, Beth, people to know that this is coming, that this is going to become intense. It's going to knock you to your knees. It's going to knock the wind out of you. This is going to disappoint you. This is going to haunt you in your sleep. So, and when that happens, when you begin to struggle, let somebody know so that they could buffer you, help you mitigate the effects and set it off. But when we don't tell people what's going to happen, they struggle with their struggle and they think it's a personal flaw. Another thing he said, and this is part of what I published in my book, I want to talk about our empathy. I think empathy is like a gift from above that we have when we bring to people, meaning that we could try to understand something that is outside of our own personal experiences to work with them. We wouldn't probably do it that way. That was not our experience. Yet we try to understand it because we are empaths. We could feel for them, their struggle, their challenge, to be in their unsuccessfulness to improve the quality of life, that empathy. But the empathy that allows us to feel for them, please understand, is a two-edged sword because you feel and you care, it gets to cut you. Therefore, your empathy needs to be nurtured. It needs to be protected. It needs to be soothed over. It needs to be healed constantly. That's part of your job. Part of you as team people working together is to nurture each other's empathy. Said, you put it all out there. Vicky, Marilyn, Rose, B, Brianna. And now you need to seal over. What are you going to do for yourself? You see? Nurture that. Remind people to say, ooh, even though you think you hit the wall and you didn't do enough, say, yeah, you gave it your all and you did this, and now shut it down. Say, I did my best and I turn over the rest for today. Now, what are you going to do? Take care of yourself and put something back to restore and replenish yourself. Take care of your empathy. But that's part of the causes when we don't do that. Many of us have our own histories. Here's ACEs again, of trauma, victimization, or we're close to exposed to it, close to us. That means two things must happen. And the Department of Defense taught us this. I don't know how I let myself forget it from time to time. They said that before you really fully move forward from a traumatic event in your own life, you must do two things. And when I say traumatic event, I don't want you to just think of the big things. I want you to think of the small things because the body stores all of them, all of them. They said that you must process and you must integrate what has happened to you. The integration says you want to recognize the external thing that's causing an internal distress. Person, place, or thing. Understand that when there's a trauma, it activates the five senses, some more than the others. The body will always remember what it heard at that time, felt at that time, saw at that time, tasted at that time, what I'm leaving out, smelt at that time. It could be a scent in the room, an environment. There's a man that attacked me at knife point when I was working with veterans who was psychotic. But then I'm working with another man later on in life, and he happens to be wearing that same aftershave. And I think, I can't stand him. Ain't got nothing to do with him, that my body's remembering and triggered by that scent that puts me back in that place of danger. So I got to recognize that and figure that out by some kind of processing. So I can recognize that the person that I'm working with is not the threat and actually is a very nice person who is safe to work with. And I'm going to smell it so I can kind of get myself conditioned, because I'm never going to ask him to get rid of his aftershave, but But you can only do that if you talk and you process. That's the other thing you must do. Process what has happened. And for a lot of cultural reasons, let me pick on culture, which I think needs to be understood. And did I say it needs to be understood? But it shapes who we are. It shapes who we are. And many of us come out of those cultures where we were oriented not to talk, not to express. Some of you said that in the chat a little bit earlier. Keep things to yourself. And I'm saying that may have served a purpose for our parents. It may have served a purpose for you early on in life. But I bet many of us didn't predict that we'd be doing this kind of work. And so it does not serve a purpose. We need to talk, we need to express, we need to open up, we need to release what is going on so that we mitigate the intensity of the impact of other people's traumas on us and the trauma we feel secondarily or vicariously on behalf of them. Does that make sense? We got to do that. We got to do that. Go back and talk about what has happened to you. And you may feel nervous about doing it, but when you do that, again, you disengage from some of it. You reconnect to yourself, but again, I'm repeating myself, you reduce the intensity of how you feel. You desensitize yourself to the trauma of those experiences. And the more you talk about it, the less it upsets. It may trigger you, but you recover much more quickly. Does that make sense? Makes sense. Critical to do. Any questions? Any questions?
Yes, there is a question. Someone said, what I want to receive from this meeting is to recognize what I am feeling and ways to keep going by not stressing, and how to cope moving forward in order to assist others. That's a question somebody asked. So.
That's really not a question, but that is a request.
Yes, I'd say that.
That's a request. And there's a lot to that. Let me see if I can break that down a little bit. That is a big request.
No, it's a big one. I mean, if I can respond from a personal place for myself, I mean, I love the motivation to move forward to assist others, but I think it's also just motivation for ourselves, you know, finding ways so that we can just keep ourselves in focus too. And maybe this is another training, Beverly. Maybe this is
it's kind of this kind of a overviews it a little bit. But the truth of the matter is, what that person's request is there's got to be a lot of processing to what you have gone through. I'm going to infer, maybe even assume a little bit, that you've held on to stuff for a long time and didn't do some work with it, and it's still haunting you. It's still affecting you. It's still shaping the way you see and experience. But your feelings, see, who's that woman that's on TED Talk? Her name is Brianne something. We've got to learn to respect our feelings. We got to learn to address it. And I think, again, our cultural orientation said to dismiss it, don't operate in feelings, operate in our intellect, that kind of thing, our logic and our reason. And I want to say, no, we are feeling people that need to be connected to self, need to be connected to spirit, mind, body, earth, our surroundings and our environment. Feel what you feel, address what you feel. Because see, when you don't do that, when you suppress your feelings, that's what killed 57,000 veterans. When they got back home, 57,000 of them died from self-destructive behaviors because they didn't deal with what they felt about what their experiences were. So part of what that request says, and what the mandate is, if you will, says that you've got to learn and you need help processing what is eating you up, what is tearing you apart, what is festering in your inner being, your thought, your mind, you see, because there's a feeling. And then there's a thought, write this down, a thought about the feeling, and then ultimately a behavior. A behavior. And that behavior oftentimes is not in your best interest. If it was me, for the things that I've gone through, that would make me make a cocktail every night. Can I be real? That'll make me eat some serious carbohydrates, like a quarter ice cream without a bowl, just a spoon. You see? That'll make me not sleep. That'll make me do this. That'll make me, my temper, my tolerance, my impatience, my whatever is gone. Is not available at the moment. I could blow up for almost nothing because I haven't dealt with what's really bothering me, my feeling. So that's part of the work that needs to be done. Thank you, Sophie. Breon Brown. She talks about that. You'll need to look at her on TED Talk. She's powerful. She's powerful, right? So that's part of it. I don't think I lost some of the rest of your requests there. But before you move on to others, continue to do what you do for others. As you take care of yourself and you pull up all of your blind spots that's shaping the way you behave, react, respond, you will do better generally in other areas, but you first. Can I use this word? Write this down. Prioritize self. Prioritize self. And our clients will do the better because we're in a healthier state. All right? So there's a lot more to that, but Beth, let's talk about that. We need to break that down in some other kind of context. I have these talking circles that I do. Sarah could tell you about the talking circles that I spend about 90 minutes with an agency groups. And we just kind of share. We have a talking circle to put these things out and address them. We may want to look at something like that, right? Thank you for sharing. Lack of self-care. Most of us are very poor at self-care. We try to get around to it. But if anybody here does self-care, some activity, every day, consistently without fail, you're tenacious about it, type that in. Anybody do something every single day, on clock work, tenaciously, nothing gets in the way, type that in. Say, I do. The person who does exercise, I need your help because I be flaky. Pray. Okay, I pray to pet my dog prayer. Some of you do some stuff. Okay, now stop answering. Now I want you to say, how many of you do something several times a day? On clockwork. On clockwork, no fail. Several times a day. Say, I do, I do. If you do something several times a day, that's self-care. There you go, Margaret. Nope. Okay, the next thing I want you to do, how many of you only have one stress a day? Boom. Boom. We have multiple stresses a day, and with every single stress comes a chemical reaction in the body that's cumulative, compounded, and exacerbating our system. So we need to do something several times a day. And part of what we'll talk about later on after break is what can you do in just a minute or 2 minutes or even 3 minutes. All right. Yes, Brianna, thank you for your honesty. I'm going to tell you something because you said that. I'm very self-disclosing. Makes some people nervous, but I'm just that way. Brianna, I get to a point at some point in my life, not too far back, that with all the work that we do, all of you do, my self-care that I hired a coach to prompt me, to push me, to nudge me, to remind me, and I found it an inconvenience. Did you hear what I said? My self-care was an inconvenience because it was interfering with my work. Now, how's that? We've got to flip the switch on that, folks. Get back to that word, prioritize. The work will turn out better. It will be more productive, better quality, more effective when we prioritize ourselves. Got you, Berenice. Thank you for the response. Yeah. Y'all talking to me. I love that. I love that. Keep on talking because it's a conversation. It's not a lecture. Causes and triggers that have a compounded effect with us. And what I liked about this camel is it's pointing out, you can let so much stuff pile up, and one little thing happens, a little thing. Like I remember coming home from working at the child welfare with the children dying of cancer and leukemia. And it was like a 2-hour ride on the subway because I lived in New York at the time. And I walk in my door and my children would do one or two things. They want to tell me what wasn't fair about their chores. And I'm thinking about children who are dying, and I want them to get away from me real quick, telling me about what's not fair. The other thing that they would do, Beth, they would say, Mommy, we got a trip tomorrow, and we need you to go to the store and get some cheese. I just got off the subway for 2 hours, and it's late at night. And I know that that trip note has been in the bottom of the book bag for 2 weeks up until now. And I'm just learning about it. And I'm about to put everybody up for adoption. See, it's a little thing because that's what all kids do. But because I let so many things pile up, my window of tolerance is gone, and I want to give away my children. And I know those who home, many of you home with your kids during this COVID, working home and they're in the house, getting on your last nerve. Yeah, some of y'all be thinking about that too. But you get my point. Little thing could be the breaking point. The little thing. Here's some of the other common triggers, causes and triggers. There's some warning signs. We just don't sleep. Even when you think you sleep. Your mind is in freaking overdrive, thinking about all the stuff you didn't get done, the things you got to do, whatever the case is, that has its own reaction. I eat the top off the table when I'm really, really stressed. And it's mostly carbs, mostly carbs. It's sort of like somebody had said years and years ago, a couple of decades ago, 3 maybe to me, that it's almost like for us, it's like chasing a cocaine high. We eat that carb that takes us up and then we come back down and we need to put something down. Think about how many times you eat and you're not even hungry. You just need to keep yourself going. That's like I open up a box of chocolate chip cookies. I'm going to eat 2. Give me that whole thing is gone. You'll know what I'm talking about. I'm being candid. If you're with me, you go ahead and say that. Remember I said it knocks the immune system out. We're susceptible to everything. You get cold. You know how you get over a cold and 3 months later, you're still coughing or your nose is still running. Does that make sense? Because your immune system is shot. That's from the stress hormone reaction in your body. But it's an indicator that you need to do something. We're accident prone. How many of you are clumsy? I live in a 2-story house. I can't tell you how many times I fall up the stairs, not down the stairs, right? I walk through the door jam moves over, almost takes my shoulder off when I'm under stress. Under stress, you drop stuff. The accident prone. Contributing factors to it, compassion fatigue, all of this stuff, vicarious trauma, past personal histories, countertransference, high ideals. These are all contributing factors to compassion fatigue. What else? Here's a little bit of a trick question, but I already told you the answer. What else has a similar symptoms to us? Somebody already said it, of compassion fatigue and can contribute to the symptom. What is that word? It begins with an O. Who's the person who mentioned how you feel about the Asians, the attacks, hate attacks on Asians? That word is called oppression. Whether it's yours or others. We see it all around us. That's another contributing thing. So don't minimize that. Don't minimize that. I think, like you said, I was managing COVID more than relatively well. And I deal with a lot of people who are agencies who are impacted in the medical communities with COVID. And I did something about that for myself to help myself stabilize and recover. What I didn't realize that the oppression issues, the racial hatred and climate was mounting up, and I didn't effectively deal with that. And that caused me to have another heart failure January 18th this year. I didn't see it coming, you see, but it was other people's experiences with oppressions that took me down. Does that make sense? Don't minimize that process, that talk about that, continue to do the work with Beth and them about that. 2 states that we'll be in. Oh, I need to stop for break. Am I right, Sarah?
Yes, that's right. We're at 10:30, so this would be a great time to take a break.
Okay, so I want y'all to take a break. I see you back at 1:45. Go get some hydration, get a stretch, get some water, get some fresh air, and I'll see you back at 1:45. Are there any questions before as you leave?
I think people are just
No.
Yeah, they're saying they're really appreciative of your what you revealed about your heart condition and glad that you seem to be better.
Yeah, let them know that I did a broadcast on it because it was called Broken Heart Syndrome, which is interesting. Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. It wasn't plaque, arteries, valves, or anything like that. The amount of stress in my body, the amount of exhaustion that I was not aware of, bent my heart out of shape, and the wall lining is in trouble. That's what caused that heart failure. And I want people to know about that too. So if you look at that, you can understand how to, I don't know how you necessarily see it coming, but it disendorses the importance of taking care of yourself.
Absolutely.
See you all back at 1:45. Bye-bye. Let's move on. I want to talk to you about two states of being that I want you to be acutely aware of. And these states of being are with you every day, all day. You're either regulated or you're dysregulated, regulated or dysregulated. Howbeit, I'm going to say with all the certainty that you're dysregulated more than you're regulated. But I want you to be aware of it so that you do yourself the work of becoming regulated. Regulated means that you could manage things within a window of tolerance. Remember the positive, the more moderate, and the toxic states of stress, but you could still manage it within a window of tolerance. Even if you don't know what to do, you know who to ask. I'm up against the wall. I'm gonna talk to Cynthia. I'm gonna talk to Lucy. I'm gonna talk to Sally. I'm gonna talk to Brianna. Ooh, help me figure this thing out. It's gonna be all right. See, I can bring myself on back to a less activated. The stress state is gonna be activated, but I could come on back down because Brianna may not even tell me anything really to do. She said, you just need to stop for a moment and breathe, lady. Take a walk, take a pause, get a cup of tea. See, so I can bring myself, but I got to be aware of the fact that I'm dysregulated. Because see, the same exact stress, working with the same person, same activity, same behavior, same pattern, way of being. But when I'm dysregulated, it is outside of my window of tolerance. And so my response is not a response, it's a reaction. It's a reaction, you see, because I can't bring up my most effective way of dealing with the same thing. Does that make sense? So understand that based on what you do, you're most often throughout the day, several times a day, dysregulated in your stress response. Your stress response. Therefore, several times a day, you put it on your calendar. You take a pause to re-regulate, decompress the body, de-stress the body. Even if it just means I'm gonna call Sarah and say, let's just have a little chat for a moment, get a cup of tea, let's talk. Ooh. I'm not gonna talk about a lot, but I just need to do that to stop. Does that make sense? Be aware of these states. Your job is to get back over here all day long. Let's look at some of the science, some of the neuroscience behind compassion fatigue. This is not an exhaustive explanation, but it gives you a basic trajectory of the stress hormone in your body. This is also my validation that self-care is not a cute idea. Something is really, really happening. Something is really, really happening. I want to point out just a few points. Don't ask me about the reptilian or the limbic system. That's not the point. Get the basics. Get the basics. This guy here, Beth, raise your hand if you can see my cursor.
Yes, I can see your cursor moving.
Okay, so it's important for me to point. This guy here is called the amygdala. I want you to understand that this is, you may want to take a little bit of note, not too much, because I got a deeper explanation of it. This is the guy that has the first response of anything that's happening. They probably say it's the most primal part of the brain that's understood by neuroscientists. That way back in the paleontology era, this is the guy that says, watch it. Tyrannosaurus Rex is coming, you better get out of there. That is all about your survival. All about your survival. And so it's going to notice something and say, uh-oh, watch it. And the way it does it, it communicates though with the whole body mind to warn you, alert you. Write these words down: alert, warn, alarm mechanism. Alert, warning, alarm mechanism. That's its job, to save your life, to protect you. And it does that by sending cellular communicators all over the brain and the body to say, watch it. Oh my goodness, something is happening. That's an automatic response. It doesn't wait for you. It just does that because it's about your survival. As a matter of fact, it's smarter than you. Now, among the places that gets that communication is this guy called the hippocampus. Hippocampus is a modulator. It needs to put up his hand and say, no, wait a minute, amygdala. This is not that bad. We'll figure this out. But it also says this is pretty serious, but we're still going to figure this out. This is what we're going to do. We're going to talk to somebody, or this is what Beth says to do in these situations. That's what it should do. But it could only modulate and slow down that chemical if you are regulated. Because when you're dysregulated, what happens is that amygdala doesn't spray the chemical in a way that's manageable. It blasts the chemical. And so it knocks the hippocampus out of kilter and it cannot perform its functions. We'll get to those in a moment. Now, whether the hippocampus can function or not, it's going to send a communication over to the orbital frontal cortex. What did I tell you guys about how you feel, ultimately how you think, and ultimately how you're going to behave? This is the executive command center. See, and when the hippocampus is spraying that communication over there, then it says, well, based on the information I got, this is how I think I should respond to this situation. But when it cannot, because you let things, what's those three words? Cumulative, compound, exacerbate your state, then this is knocked out of kilter. So the information that goes over here will almost have you purely reactive. Let's look at the real deal. Look at the real deal. Beginning with your body goes into this instant kind of stress state. Now here's, I want you to understand. This is how we get sick. This is how we get sick. When that amygdala goes off, the body goes into the stress response automatically. I want to keep emphasizing it doesn't ask your permission, it doesn't wait for you. And when it goes into that response, all of your systems get out of order. They lose their coherence. The pupils dilate, the salivary glands, the tracheal, the bronchial, the lung vessels, the heart rate speeds up or slows down, the adrenaline glands kick in. You ever tell somebody to calm down when they're upset? What they say? Don't tell me to calm down, damn it. They just really go over the top because that's kicked in, you see. The blood vessels in the skin, the liver, the kidney, the stomach decreases its digestive enzymes. That's where we get that kind of ulcers and stuff. And the intestines, the movement of food slows down, and all kinds of things happen instantaneously. See, because I want you to understand this. When that amygdala kicks in and sends out that chemical, part of the protective mechanism that goes into activation is a constricted state, which means that there's fossa tissue laying between the skeletal and muscular structure, you see, and it tightens and braces, waiting for worst case scenario. Waiting for you because you're waiting for the end of the day or for the weekend or for the next holiday. And as you take on more stresses, because things come at us all the time, remember the nervous breakdown, you see, the constriction gets tighter, tighter and tighter, and it begins to choke. And ergo, this is a stress response in the body that's automatic all the time. Now, the unfair thing is, while this is automatic, but things that go back into the regulated state, where there's a flow again, you must do something. That's so unfair. You've got to do something, else it stays like this. It stays like this. When back in here, the body's back in coherence, there's some homeostasis in the body, things are flowing like they should do, releasing, relaxing, is unconstricted. This is what you want to do. This is why you don't wait to the end of the day. As a matter of fact, Brian Post said this to us. He says, when you hold on to multiple stresses, you see, you move yourself from a state of dis-ease to disease, from dis-ease to disease. So therefore, your work is to do something to stop this process, unconstrict the body so you get flow again. Let's take another peek at this amygdala and this hippocampus. Instant stress response, constriction. It stays there. You're going to answer another phone. You're going to take another email. You're going to have another conversation. You're going to do this. The kids in the back doing this. Your mother needs something. Your spouse needs something. Your partner needs something. You just keep on, keep on, keep on, keep on. And so this is blasting. This is knocked out of kilter. Now, I want you to write these 4 words down. When the hippocampus is knocked out of kilter, its job is to be able to be a rational thinker, write down rational. Critical thinker, write down critical thinking. Problem solver, write down problem solver. And here's the big one, short-term memory. It's hijacked. That's what Bruce Perry said. I like the word hijacked. That means it's temporarily stolen and you have the potential of getting it back, you see. But this is what happens to us when this goes off. So you want to do something, and I call the stress hormone this. I want to have a visual. I call it like the fog, All the information. You ever try to introduce about 6 of your friends and you're going to leave somebody's name out? And you got more than 3 children, but you're going to call everyone except the one you want to turn upside down before you get the right name? Or you back out of your garage and you still got your slippers on and you don't know if you're going to church or going to the airport. Does that make sense? And you forget this and you forget that. You go to Safeway, you come home with everything except what you went to Safeway to get. This is a flooded hippocampus. Now, in truth, you got information, you got a report, you're writing on a kid you've been working with for 3 years. You can't remember nothing but the child's name at the moment when you're under stress. The information is back there behind that stress hormone, the fog, and you really have the power to decompress so that that fog could go down and you could access that information. And the hippocampus has a capacity. I'll totally admit to slow it down. We got this. It's going to be okay. Oh no, this is a real concern, and this is what you're going to do. This is what you have the power to do. And therefore, when this communication goes over here, you're not this reactive. You're more responsive. You can think. You know who to ask. You know what to ask. Any questions? Any questions? Yes, no, give me my why or my ends.
Lots of ends coming in.
Okay.
Wait, there is, let's see, there was a question earlier about, is it the same as fight or flight? Someone was asking about.
Yeah, well, that's part of the decision that the hippocampus and the orbital frontal cortex has to make, the fight or flight. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for asking. Let's look at some of the symptoms. Now, you asked me for warning signs and indicators. This is what these are. I'd rather you look at them as warning signs and indicators than look at them as symptoms, because we're really not trying to diagnose each other. I'm just asking you to notice each other. And I want to re-emphasize and repeat myself again. The person who's beginning to be overtaken by too much stress is the last person to realize that they're being taken by too much stress. The observer is, your colleague is, the people you work with, the people sitting at that meeting table, and you just all over the place in desperation trying to make things work. And they know that you're stressed, but you don't know. You don't know. So I want you to see these. And again, like the ACEs screen, when you see them, the earlier you could address them and say to your person in private, don't be attacking nobody at the table, because they're going to defend their honor, to say, you know, I noticed something, Cynthia, Jacqueline, and you're not yourself. Catherine, Carla, B. I think you're doing too much. Let's take a pause. Let's take a walk. Let's get a cup of tea. Let's have a brief chat. You want to notice these things. But this is what I want to say to you. Compassion fatigue. Now here I go again with the specificity. When people talk about stress, we typically think about it in the physical realm, which we showed you on that graph with the ACEs. But it has 6 impact areas, which are cognition, emotions, behavior, interpersonal relationships. We have wrecked some of our relationships being in this COVID situation. You know, there's less babies during COVID and more divorces during COVID. Is that interesting? The people all locked up together as a reverse to the, remember when the lights were out, those kind of things, there's more babies. We're sick of each other. You get my point. But the spiritual impacts and the physical impacts. So these are some of the warning signs, indicators, or you can say symptoms underneath them. But pay attention to these. I'm not going to go over these. I want you to pay attention to apathy, because it's a real danger signal in our work. It's when apathy is often mistaken for apathy, like when a person doesn't care or things roll off of them and nothing is affecting them. In truth, what is most likely happening for people who do the work that you do, we do, is that the body has a protective mechanism of throwing up a wall. We could call that guardedness. And that wall goes up not to let anything penetrate that wall and injure you or distress you more than you already are. And so in that wall, the person could look apathetic, like stuff ain't touching him, you see? But those are the very people I want you to go through that wall and say, no, wait a minute. You know, because if I see Beth and, you know, we got a little bit of history and I'm just looking at her and I said, what's happened, something has happened and her emotion is not in alignment with that. Or she says she, you know, we got a professional fib. You know that professional fib we like to use? I'm fine. I'm fine. And I said, because based on what just happened, that's not in alignment. So I'm going to penetrate the wall and says, let's take a walk. Let's take over. And she's gonna say, I said, no, we're gonna take over. So you want to penetrate that, because the data on that, we've had more depression, alcoholism, or whatever kind of substance thing, and lots of suicide in the fields of human services, because people look like they don't care when they're really torn apart inside. So I want you to push past that, particularly if you know your colleagues. This thing of thoughts of harming self and others, I put this way, but this is what I really, really mean about it. People we work with, well, let's just say, you put out your hand to help and they bite it. There's some people we don't like to work with. Let me be very honest. There's some people that I've worked with in child welfare, and I'm talking about the parents and the caretakers, and when they miss an appointment, I was kind of glad, because they just, does that make sense to you? But I want us to learn to be honest about that, because hurt people, and we are givers and we're helpers, and it injures. And I want you to stop pretending it didn't hurt you or anger you or frustrate you or intimidate you. And you don't have to know long drawn out things. He said, she said, I did. Just said that really knocked the wind out of me. And I'm having a hard time moving forward with that. And I need to say that to you so that one of you, Margaret, Sophie, Tatiana or Misty could just help me get some perspective. Say, well, okay, this is what they do. This is how they do them, because this is their pain, their guilt, their grief, their whatever. And this is how maybe you may want to approach that different. And when my hippocampus, now watch this, my rational thinking, critical thinking, problem solving is not available to me in a moment, then I need Misty and Sally, and I need Brianna to say, well, Beverly, you may want to try this, because I can't get there by myself. Don't be ashamed of that. Be real in our humanity. We get injured. So talk to the right person about it. Release it so that you can move on. Depression and depletion, major concern in this way. I have declared many years ago that all of us are in a depressed state. Not clinically depression, although you can get there. We are a depressed state because the very nature of the work that we do has an undercurrent of sorrow. Ain't nothing celebratory about what people do to children, but you could do it. Here's that resilience piece again. You're resilient enough to keep on keeping on, pushing through, rising up. But it's like every morning you get out of bed and pick up a sack of bricks and walk uphill in behalf of somebody else. And we're wearing, draining, depleting our systems, i.e., we're in a depressed state. Now, when you drain the body and deplete the body of all its resources, it's struggling because it's empty. And we have another bad habit that's called not recharging yourself. And so what does the body do? It has to go someplace. So it goes all the way over here and taps on the immune system. Remember in the ACEs? It shuts it down. Therefore, you're susceptible to everything floating and laying on the surface. When they talked about COVID-19 and who were the people at the highest risk factors, I say everybody in human services, especially in child welfare. Because let me tell you something else Bruce Perry said, and if you hadn't heard him say it, listen to him. He'll tell you, because he wrote about it. He says, people who work in child welfare, he says, it will, this is a direct quote, tax you emotionally and wear the body out. Please write that down. Wear the body out. All of your system begins to collapse underneath there. I.e., what did I say? Brian Post says, we move from a state of dis-ease to disease. So do something, but do something also to boost your immune system frequently to build yourself back up. I like to tell people to incorporate some alternative healthcare with their traditional healthcare. I respect traditional healthcare, blessed to give my kid a kidney, but I don't trust it because it depends on us to give them some good symptoms for them to make an educated guess. And by the time we decide, because we don't prioritize our health to go to the doctor at all, we let something really advance. So that's not healthcare to me, that's a care. Alternative medicines, they're into prevention. They read your pulses, your tongue, your eyes, your saliva, your this, that, and the other, and they let you know that some organ is beginning to be challenged or not functioning optimally, you see? So consider to incorporate both in your life. That's a personal choice, but it's something that I do routinely. My acupuncturist, my Bagua person, my muscle mechanic, is similar to chiropractic, but it's a step up from that kind of thing. My nutritionist, my whatever, but get your stuff together so you be in prevention. Your body is always challenged with this work that we do. If it's any thoughts, type that in, type that in. The behavioral things, they're pretty clear, except when I talk about, and Sarah, I think I slipped past the slides on secondary vicarious trauma. Remind me to get back to that. Talk about secondary trauma and vicarious trauma. I want us to know this, that we are, because of what we know, because of what you've been exposed to in terms of the awful things or the horrible things that people could do to children, we will always be hypervigilant, hyper alert, hyper ramped up, startle alert response. We're always on the lookout for the next thing that might happen, the next victimization or reenactment of a trauma or an abuse. We're like that, which keeps chemical flooding our systems. Even when you're not necessarily thinking about it on the surface consciously, it's there. It's there. And let me tell you what hypervigilance has done. It has hyper alert. It has changed the way we trust and see and view the world, because we know, unlike the rest of the widget world that works on stuff, that these things could happen. We kind of see danger everywhere. You can't be at a cookout, a birthday party, a wedding, sitting in church without observing something that don't look right to you. If you're like me, my kids, because I worked in child welfare, they didn't get to spend the night in nobody's house. Kids had to come to my, even my own family. I love my sister, but she had a boyfriend. Nope. That's who we've become, you see. Does that make sense to you? So you want to be aware of that. But when you're staying in hypervigilance, looking for the next thing to happen, the chemical also comes. So you need to do some work to put that in perspective. I'd be sitting at a cookout. We go every year, been going over 45 years to Yosemite Lake, sitting under the cabana with these families. Now we got like 4 generations of people since our kids were little. My baby's 50 years old in September. And all the other adults are eating barbecue, playing cards, reading books, they're dancing, having a conversation. And every time the kids squeal on the water slide, I'm the one jumping, because I know what people do to children. I think Freddy Krueger done snatched one of them kids. But part of the perspective is I had to say to some people at some point, because my sister-in-law pointed out, she said, ask some people to watch the kids for a little while so you can have some peace of mind and you can join the rest of the adults. But this is who we've become. I just want you to understand it's a chemical reaction. So do something. Do something. What is your negative coping skills? Type them in and be honest, because we all got them. Type in, what is your negative coping skills? And while you're typing that in, I want to tell you mine. My mother died with children. My father worked at the railroad at night, but my father was a Georgia man. Georgia men could cook. He used to come home from working at the railroad at night. Before he got Denise and I up for school, he would make homemade buttermilk, buttery biscuits and put them bad boys in the oven. And we ain't never woke up to no alarm clock. We woke up to that smell. You hear what I'm saying? See, y'all see me up close? You see these hips? That's my daddy's fault. And I'm the lady, when I get stressed, I go to Popeye's chicken. I don't eat no chicken, but I want 2 of them biscuits. Does that make sense? I also don't let me next buy get near your cobbler, your peach, or your, because there ain't gonna be no crust in there. Here's the carbs. The peaches floating all by themselves. That's my coping, you see? And when COVID started, and after a few weeks or a couple of months of all the trauma and devastation, I was having a cocktail every night instead of my glass of wine on Friday. That was my you get my point. We all, in the Western culture, most of us use some form of consumption to cope. And if you don't eat, I don't want to know you. Because some people say that they can't eat, but that ain't my people. But I respect that. I respect it. But we have negative coping skills. And the truth of the matter is, nothing you're going to say here, Mitra, Sweets, binge watching TV, got your Elaine. And sometimes I've been watching TV as an escape, so you don't have to think about what's going on in the real. Staying up late, that's my issue, Jacqueline. Me too, Maria. They're on food, junk food. Yeah. So nothing you said is wrong, except when it's overconsumption. And the reason it's overconsumption will stay that way is because you did not address the thing that triggered it. I could go around eating normal, having just a glass of wine or 2 on Friday after work. But when I need to get that bag of barbecue potato chips, the $3 size bag, and put a hurting on that with some cocktail, because I've been triggered by something and I've got to process what has triggered me before I bring my eating back to normal. Back to normal. That's what I'm saying. Figure out and process the trigger. All right. If you see anything new, Beth, let me know. Binge Netflix. I like that, Vina. Denial. Yeah, we do some denial, Theon. We most certainly do. So, oh, excuse me. I skipped my page. My thing is sensitive. I want to ask you who gets a good, now listen to me carefully. Who sleeps really, really well? Gets a good night's sleep consistently. When I say good night's sleep, I mean you wake up refreshed and you ready for Freddy. And you don't wake up in the morning with the sheets and blankets all over the bed, the pajamas choking the heck out of you. You sit on the side of the bed wishing it was still the middle of the night. You're not ready. Most of us don't in these fields of service, and I'm going to tell you why. Because every single night you go to bed with unfinished and unresolved business. Every night you go to bed like that. And part of the strategy for getting sleep, and first let me tell you the detriment of not getting sleep is this guy here, this gal here. Without sleep, we have something that's called sleep deprivation. It has been known and well documented to end your life, shorten your lifespan. It is well documented that it causes stroke risk. Now, it doesn't double the risk, it quadruples the risk. The obesity, some forms of cancer, diabetes. You see in the ACEs here again? Heart diseases, sperm count decreases, risk of life. That means shorten your lifespan. You have problems with your memory, your emotions. You lose brain tissue. We can't be affording. We don't even use but a third of it as it is. You easily, the immune system, you catch colds. This is what happens with sleep deprivation. It's damaging. It's absolutely damaging. So here's the thing. What do you do about it? I want to say this. A couple of just really, really simple strategies. It's so simple, it almost seems ridiculous. You should never end your workday without making a list of unfinished business. Just, lists. I got all kinds of lists, papers, including my little shopping stuff. There's stuff that just comes to my mind. I write it down on a piece of paper so that I don't have to hold it in my head. Just lists. And then I consolidate those things. And incidentally, when I check off something, oh my God, the brain loves to see a check mark. It just does. So do that. Put stuff, stop being so cerebral and put it on paper so it's safe because you're conscientious. And when you get ready to go to bed and you know how you think about 16 more things you got to do, personal life and professional life as well, sit up and have that little list on the nightstand and just go ahead and put it on paper. How many of you wake up at 2:30 and 3:30 in the morning? Type that in the chat real quick. How many of you wake up in the middle of the night? I know I'm talking to some people up in here, like I'm in your room. And your mind is going through this. I got to make that call. I got to write that report. I got to drop that off. I got to pick that up in the cleaners. Got to do this. Your mind is going in freaking overdrive. And this is how you know there's a problem, because it runs the list and it starts the list over. That's how you know you're in a problem. See, your mind stays in dialogue, trying to help you hold on to all the things that are important to you, and you need to shut that down. So just go ahead and sit up and put that on paper. Or like I used to do, sometimes I just sit up when there's too much stuff and I put on the recording on my phone and I just go ahead and I don't try to be sequential. I don't care about no grammar, spelling, or syntax. I just put it in there so it's safe, put that down, and I may get another couple of hours sleep. Otherwise, you wind up like that lady. This is critical. Critical. My heart failure happened because of exhaustion that I was not aware of. Bent my heart out of shape. Spiritual things, questioning. But I want to say to you, whomever your practice is, your entity is, your source is, get it back. A lot of data. I work with a lot of groups, a lot of research projects, including the Vietnam Veterans Requiem, and the folks coming back from Iraq, that when people had they incorporated, I went to the Presidio where they were incorporating all of the spiritual practices that related to those folks in combination with their treatment modalities, and they found significant progress in their capacity to reintegrate to some level of normalcy. but get your practice. I went to Canada to study under Dr. Anna Baranowski. She's the head of the Traumatology Institute. Matter of fact, she certified me in this work. And she said this, she said, she trains people and then she dispatches them to mudslides, tsunamis, and earthquakes and all that kind of stuff. But she always makes them fill out a letter, a form that says letter to the great supervisor, because she says that you should never do this work, your work, in solo, but you should have your source that's protecting, guiding, know that she's loving you, that's there for you. So whatever your thing is, however it is, get it back. And then there's the interpersonal pieces. They're self-explanatory, but as I said, in a dysregulated state, your relationships are challenged. And it has really been compounded also by the COVID restriction, social isolation situations that we have been in. And then again, of course, there's the physical, which we always pay attention to. But in addition to the immune system, as a matter of fact, I even want you to Google immune boosting foods and get a list of some things to incorporate in your diet plan. But in addition to that, I want you to think about somatic complaints. And here's the thing with somatic complaints. The body has these wonderful informant systems. In other words, is warning us, is alerting us, is saying something is wrong, something's not right, I'm tired, and it comes, the somatic complaints of those little itches and twitches and pin sticks and needles and butterflies in the stomach and tightness and whatever the case is. And sometimes there's little tears, a little something going on. And I want us to learn to pay attention to that, because your body is saying, please sit down, I'm tired as hell. Please get some more sleep. Please get some water. Please get up and stretch. Please slow it down. Please, please, please. But we don't listen. Brian Post says, when you become aware of where those distress signals are in your body, like I get really tight in my jaw. He says, put your hand over it and breathe into that. So it could be your chest, it could be your neck or shoulders, something like it could be your stomach. Just rest your hand over and be careful in front of people, you don't want to look freaky, but just do something. He says, and breathe into that stuff and imagine that oxygenation in that place. And this kind of self-soothe from the outside in, you could kind of calm it down. I tend to sit like this because I'm a clincher. I was raised in a pastoral family, so we were always raised to be nice to people who sometimes were mean to us. And so I would, be trying to get my little Mona Lisa smile. I might be clenching. And so this gets tight. Now, I told everybody, so my friend like Bev, she would say, Beverly, fix your face. It's like a kind of, I'm unconscious that I'm doing that, but when she says fix your face, and I consciously release, because I'll be like this, and some people will say to me when they talk to me, say, you okay? Because, something's building up inside, so I'm like this, and I say, yeah, I'm okay, I'm just trying to make sure you're going to be okay, because I'm about to blow. Yeah, but when I do this, see, then I could consciously just kind of relax and release that, but learn to be aware of your stress response in your own body. Mm-hmm. Any questions? Any questions? And I'm gonna move on. Let me give me my whys and my ends. Catch that for me, Beth, please.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Someone made a great statement. I wonder if hours of unused paid time off and sick time may be correlated with exhaustion and other indicators of burnout, compassion, fatigue, and insufficient care.
You'll write this down, definitely.
Yeah, I've wondered that too. I mean, because people can retire. You save up your vacation and your sick time in many systems, and then you cash it out when you retire. And so it's kind of an encouragement to not use your time.
But there's so much data they're put into place for those breaks. I got a study, Beth, from 150 countries many years ago was handed to me. And those 150 countries, unlike us, they mandate that you take your time off. They mandate that you take a break and get away from the desk, that you take a lunch away from the desk, that you take vacation. And guess what? The quality and the productivity level of their work is much higher than the United States, where we encourage people to push through. And if you tell the truth and you know yourself, this is me, I'm not gonna put this on you, you own it if you will. When I push, this ain't working so well. There's a time that I'm in absolute brain fog, I'm trying to make sense and it ain't making no sense, you see? But if I stop and I take a pause and I do something, then I get my sharpness back. So learn to also understand when your brain is not cooperating, don't, even what time of the day that you do certain kinds of work, the work that I call really essential, probably very early in the morning. The non-essential essentials, probably a little bit in the afternoon, I might need to take a break, or the non-essential, whatever the case is. But I'm sharp in the morning because that's me. I could rewrite the Constitution of the United States at 6:30 in the morning. 2 o'clock, I ain't worth a doggone. Does that make sense? But I know that, so guess where I position certain kinds of work? This is for you to figure out. This is for you to figure out. Thank you, Beth. Professional impacts, what are they? Y'all can type some of those in and I'm gonna tell you what the rest of them are. Low morale, low motivation, avoiding tasks. And when I say avoiding tasks, you know, when you've had a very difficult, painful, distressful situation, and now you got to write the summary, the report, or the contact log, or the critical incident, whatever you got to write about it, the CPS report, and your mind said, I can't look at that right now. I can't face that right now because it's too much. Oh, you see? And so you avoid it. And you may look at somebody and say, well, they procrastinate. No, it's a heightened state of overwhelm. And they need to do something to decompress. They need to do something to re-regulate so they could get back on track with doing whatever. Look at that. Questioning them, obsession about details. That's almost a panic state, that little desperation mode we get in, trying to prevent something, trying to make something happen, trying to advocate up against a wall. All the systemic barriers to our self-care, and even the work that we're trying to do, the loss of lack of resources and staff shortages and stuff like that, all of that stuff, it hits a kind of wall with us. The negativity. We can reach a point where we see this, everything is, I don't even know why I'm doing this. This is not going to work. This is not going to, this is going to, whatever. We get to a place where we can catastrophize everything. Lack of appreciation. And I'm really, really concerned about that. Yes, envy of others' success. You know something, Jai, I hope I pronounced your name right. When we are struggling, this is me, I'm gonna put it on me, then you could own it if you will. When I am struggling and I looked out at my other colleagues in the workplace when I worked there, it looked like everybody had their thing together. Look at Margot, she'd be burning up the keyboard. Donna Marie be de-escalating on the short fly. Rivera, she'd be handling all of his stuff. You just handle all of the cases, staying on, Angela's on top of everything. Lucille is never behind in her documentation. You know I can't stand her. It looked like everybody, the truth, they're struggling, but I think the struggle is me. So it's not necessarily envy, or this is the appearance that people are doing better than you and it makes you worried. But if I tell somebody, if I talk to Kim, if I talk to B or Carla or Marisol, and they said, girl, you got this going on. You just need to back up and move forward again. You see, talk, people, talk. Share, be real, release. I want to say something about lack of appreciation. And this is a very big concern in the field, is that the all-consuming nature of this work, and I want you to understand that we're consuming, because it is. It takes up all your energy, all your time, we give it away freely without much thought of self, at least up until the day, and I hope that changes. But it robs us of life. If you stop and think, most of us, if not all of us, that I'm talking to you, and it certainly happened to me, without even being aware, I gave up everything that was important, all the things that formerly gave me joy and pleasure, my arts, my craft, my drawing, my good books, my chick flicks, my movies, my concerts, my painting, my whatever. I just gave the large part of my socialization was just gone. And I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't even realize that I was so consumed in the work that I was just existing. Now watch this, and not living. Matter of fact, Beth knows this, my agency, Casey Family Programs, had a lot of money, and they used to send us all kinds of wonderful places to do these projects, because I was always a speaker and project co-worker with somebody. And they sent me to Scottsdale, Arizona, Washington State, and they even sent me to Disneyland 3 times to speak for the Humane Society. Does that make sense? And I went on their ticket, and I never once went to see any of the sites. I'm in Disneyland, in the park. And the only thing I did, because my daughter-in-law bought me a camera to prove that I saw some stuff, is got on the monorail and rode from one end of the park, because I didn't have the energy or the interest. I'm not going to say the time, because I had the time, but I just didn't care. I had lost living, and I want y'all to think about that. Therefore, you get those people in your community, those people who are close to you. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, that are going to pull you into fun. See, I got a therapeutic community, and I was very candid about that. Matter of fact, they used to say to me, well, let us know when you have time so that we could do some things. I said, are you kidding? Let me tell you how this is going to work. I don't ever think I have time. So when you see my garage open, come get me. Just on a periodic schedule, call me and say, Beverly, it's time. You see, so that I can stop and go ahead and buy the tickets and then make me go, and I'll give you your money back. Whatever you need, but get people to pull you back into life so you can reconnect with those things that formally give you. Let me tell you something else. Those are part of your right brain activities, and without them, we are in more of a depressed state. Any questions, any reflections and reactions to that? Yes, Donna Marie, you give yourself away. And I'm asking you to reclaim your life, your joy. Remember, I said, it's not really, I thought it would take away from the work, but in truth, when I did that, it improved the quality of services that I gave from everybody, because I'm working from a healthier, happier, more at peace Beverly. So recognize that in others and pull your colleagues' coat and let them know. Leanne, let Leanne know you're doing a great job. Now, what you gonna do for fun? What you gonna do for laughter? When do you seek help? Actually, all the time. When you begin to always see things in darkness, when you have these acute moments of distress, anxiety, sadness that sweeps over you for no apparent reason. When you see the world in terms of victims. And when you experience these things, I want you to break that cultural barrier that's instilled in so many of us and ask for help. That's your first line of defense. That's not weakness. Let me say that again. That's wisdom. Give people permission to notice you. And then for the rest of you who, when you see your colleagues struggling and being out of character, even if they're getting on your nerve, realize that they need help. Reach out and have each other's back. I like to use the thing about mode of behavior. If I see a change in character with you as my colleague, I know something's up. And it's not that you got out of bed and decided to be in a very bad mood. There's too much going on for you. Yes, they on, especially women. We do that. We do that. Annoyance is like an automatic thought. Take a deep breath and have a more intentional thought. The Theon is struggling. It's too much going on. Right? All right. So I want to talk about release, reboot, recharge. This is Beverly's 3 R's, never for you to forget them. I want them employed in your life every day, all day long. The release really talks about this, that it is important for you to get things off your chest. I said that before, I'm saying that again. To just open up and say something. Again, it doesn't have to be a long, drawn out anything. It's just a matter of not holding on to things, letting them fester inside of you until you're ready to blow. So open up and say something. Some of my talking circles is what I talked about. Beth and I will talk about that later. The reboot is to do some technique or activity to get you snap back. It decompresses the body, relaxes the body, clears the mind, slows down the fog of that chemical called the stress hormone so you can think more clearly, be more effective, have a little bit more energy to get you through the rest of the day instead of pushing and taking yourself further down. Reboot. And then the recharge. Always replenish every day because you drain, you exhaust, you deplete yourself every day throughout the day. And so put something back. My mantra is this, and feel free to plagiarize this bad boy. I really got this from the wisdom of somebody else talking to me some years back. They said, I will not sacrifice myself to help others. I will simply increase myself to help others. That means I'm always putting so much there that I got overflow with which to serve. But it's enough for me. I'm giving them overflow, not the last vestiges of my energy. It's a big difference, a big difference. So you want to do that for yourself daily. And I'm going to give you now one of the reboot activities. One of the reboot activities. How am I doing, Sarah? My Sarah?
Yes, I think she had to step away for a second, but we're at 11:30.
Okay, good. I want you to do this because I want you to know one thing that's available all the time to unconstrict the body. And this is so critical. So you can move away from that illness that you're beginning to create in your own system. I'm going to ask you to count complete breaths. Stay with me. Complete breath is an inhalation and an exhalation is one breath. Inhale, exhale, 2 breaths. Inhale, exhale, 3 breaths. I want you to do that. And I want you to breathe in a normal, pitiful way that you do. Anyway, nothing special. Just breathe the way you breathe. I'm going to count 60 seconds. So I'm going to tell you when to start and when to stop. So just count those breaths. Start counting. Okay, stop counting. And I want you to write that number down on a piece of paper. Write that number down. And now I'm going to stop share and Sarah's going to take over. And she's going to bring up a breathing machine. And I'm going to want you to count according to its instructions. It's going to show you a line that says when to inhale and another line to show you when to exhale. Now, this is what I want you to do. I don't want you to breathe out of your nose because many of us have a little deviated septum. Instead, I want you to breathe out of your mouth like this. And you notice when you breathe like that, the breath is not just in your chest, your stomach expands and it contracts. That's what I want you to do, belly breaths. So use the machine and I'm gonna again give the count. Sarah, turn the machine on. Beth, give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, Sarah, stop the machine. Thank you. Okay, what I want you to do now is to take a pause, take a breath, relax your body. And I want you to go back and count complete breaths again. Go back to your normal way of breathing, nothing special. Just simply count each breath. Remember, inhalation and exhalation is one breath. Start counting. Okay. Now I want you to write that breath number down. Write that down. Now this is really important. In the chat box, I want you to write the breaths in this order. I want you to write first the first count before the breath machine. And then after that, the second breath count after the breath machine. The first, so you're saying I went from here, breath machine, to here. Let's see what we get. I got a 19 to 13, 15 to 15, 10 to 7, 23 to 10, Vina, 20 to 11, Marilyn, 8 to 5, 20 to 12, Alexa, 19 to 13, 17 to 13. Some people stay the same, and that's the reason for that. 16 to 12, 22 to 8, Brianna. What are you seeing? Somebody open up and tell me what you see. What did this demonstrate? And Brianna, I think you're right there ready to open your mouth. Go ahead and unmute. I can see passion in your face.
So I noticed that the first time I did it, I was hearing everything, and I could hear the phone ring and my emails ping. And so I was trying to do quick breaths so that I could kind of peek and see what was going on. But when we started doing the more intentional breaths, and I started counting, and then when I redid it, my breath slowed down a lot.
Yes.
And so I heard my email ping, but in my ear, but I didn't even look at it because I was just like, it was in the back of my mind, and I was like, oh yeah, I was gonna say something, but then I just kept breathing, and so I noticed my breath really slowed down.
Excellent. And along with that, Brianna, all of you, her heart rate, her blood pressure, her central nervous system quieted, slowed down easy. See, there's a heart rate variance to the way we breathe. And what I wanted you to know, what I love about this machine, the powerfulness of showing the dramatic change you can make to move from dysregulated to more regulated in 60 seconds. Who can't wait? What phone call can't wait? What answer to a question that's got to say, oh Lord, but can't wait for you to take 60 seconds? And God bless you if you could take 2 minutes, because if I'm your accountability partner and I see you looking crazy, I said, you're going to stop and breathe. You're going to say, no, leave me. I said, no, I'm going to leave when you breathe and bring you on down so you could get your reboot. You see what I'm saying? That's a powerful thing. Let me show you something dramatic here in the heart rate variance. And I want you to understand what we do to our systems, our neurobiological systems, our neurophysiological systems. Here's a healing breath. 5 complete breaths. You see, y'all were nowhere near that. But in truth, that's not realistic. If you're in a hospital and they're taking your pulse ox, your respiration, they want to see something like an 8 to 11. But if you do the work to bring yourself here and slow everything down, then you'll go back to a more normal something about here. But how many of you were here? You see what I'm saying? Severe states of stress, the sympathetic system. Remember I said all that constriction, nothing is working the way it should. But by taking that 60 seconds, you brought yourself back down to a much better place. Some of you made it down here to 9. You see? Don't let people get away with acting like they're okay when the situation warrants that they're not. Make them breathe. And here's the truth. You should remember it yourself, but you're not going to. So you may as well tell your Siri, tell Alexis, put it on your phone to remind you to breathe. Because I've been walking around with a lot of very intelligent, well-read, with more degrees than a thermometer people, and I had to look at them and, oh, you're not breathing. Because we do that unconsciously. So that's the power of that. That is one of your reboots. Always also pay attention to where you are on this dimension about stress. But here's some stress busters. Other things to consider doing: getting your sleep. I can't say enough about supportive relationships. You know, I'm a Black woman with Black parents from indigenous grandparents and great-grandparents. And they always taught us the importance of connection, although I let myself get caught up in the work and forget that. But all of the real data says that our connectedness is so powerful. As a matter of fact, we gave you some resource from the Restorative Practices Alliance and Gabriel Cram and all of those people from all over the world that talk about that kind of connection. But, you know, use the Zoom. Have tea parties, chat parties, cocktails. I have cocktails after work, a little too much, but I just do with people on Zoom. And we bring a little food and snacks and we have parties and stuff, but connect. These are some of your things. These are some of your tools for stress management. Get your therapeutic community. Those people who will pull you into fun, will not let you isolate. And I tell people, Sarah will tell you, my Sarah, I need to be boss. I need her, when I get ready to do too much, she said, I love her. You know, she just says, no, but it's time to just do something for me. Does that make sense? Leave the cell phone on a different room in the house when you're having your meal or when you're trying to watch your movie or read your good book. That's a trick. But get your people. Now here's where they are. There's your orchestra people and there's your balcony people. This is a personal choice, but again, I learned from somebody wiser than me. I have balcony people and I love them, but they're in a balcony because they don't have that much access to my life because they can't wait for me to get around to tell me how bad their day is, to solve their problems. They can't wait. And so I can't afford, based on the work that we do, you do, to have those people just consume me with more stuff after what we've been through. So they're in the balcony. And this is what I do. I love them because I'm going to make an appointment with myself when I'm going to get back to them. Matter of fact, some of those people who used to whine, they don't do that anymore because I think they figured me out. I would call them when I knew they were not home and leave them a love message. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to hear all the rest of this stuff. I just want them to know I love them. Does that make sense? Balcony people. The orchestra people, conversely, are the people who you will give access. They're closer to you because they don't need you. They like being with you. You get the difference. And they want to have fun. They want to do some exciting things. They got some great ideas, some creativity, some this. We play games on there. We compete on the computer. We have parties on the computer. We do whatever we have. So I've joined 2 social clubs since the COVID thing. But those are my people that just fill me with humor, laughter. My boss, best friend Ray, he says, Beverly, it's time to do this. And I said, well, Ray, he said, that wasn't a question. It's time to do that. So consider make a list and build your own therapeutic community. Along that too, I wanted to say this too. These are your tools for the road. But perhaps the most important people in my estimation, and I don't have it on this slide, write this in the toolbox for me, the chat box for me, Sarah, is accountability partners. I don't believe any of us should do this work without accountability partners. Those are the people we give permission to notice us. Those are the people who you work with. Those are the people who get what you do, why you do. They know the mission. They know the scope of the challenges that you face. You don't even have to explain nothing. I could just call. I could just call Jessica. I could just call Joanne. I could just call Jacqueline, Melanie. And I could say, oh, and they say, I get it. I know. You want to talk about it? I say, well, not right now. That's it. That's okay. I'm right here. And you don't have to go through no narrative, no nothing, just people who get it. But this is what they do. They notice me because I gave them permission to tell me I've done too much, you're doing too much, you need to stop, you need to pause, you need to take a break. They're loving meddlers in my life. And let me tell you something, nigga, I pick people who have the constitution, the strength of character to push me. See, because if you come to me sometime when I feel like the work is more important than my life, and I'm often like that, I still am, even though I struggle with it, they'll say, well, you know, you need to stop. And I might say to them, well, you know, you need to leave me alone. I got too much to do. But see, my strong person, Cynthia, she said, right, I'm gonna leave you alone for about 5 or 10 more minutes and then I'm gonna shut it down for you. That's my accountability partners. The people, now watch this word, to save me from myself. I'm honest enough with myself to know that I need that. That's Sarah's role in a lot of places. I come out that hospital before I get out that hospital, being in ICU and cardiology. She had already canceled, postponed several things. She didn't ask me. She's an accountable. She made a decision. No, this is, get your people, pick your people, talk to them and make an agreement how you're going to have each other's back on the job, on this work that you do. But these are some of the things you do as your tool, your right brain activities. Your dance therapy, dance yourself happy. Use meditation, get your massages. Oh my God, that's one of the things I missed during COVID. But do that, humor, your brisk walks, aromatherapy. Bro, I went to, my daughter gives me gift certificates and I got all, I got stuff sprayed on my pillows so I could do it. Just do it. Muscle relaxing kinds of things, feeding your spirit. Play. Every single night, I either play Sparta Solitaire or Sudoku. I race at the computer because I'm good. I love racing. But see, it doesn't allow, it shuts off the other thoughts about the nature of the content of the work that we did all day, you see. I play that. I play digital art on the computer every night. Every night. I do maybe 2 of those 3 things, but that's my routine, to shut it down and to move into my happy space, my right brain, which incidentally is this. Right brain chemistry, that's your appreciation for color, for art, for music, for form, imagination, intuition. It's totally different chemistry than your left brain, which is your logic, your reason, your math, your oral expressive language. And that's important, your left brain. But let me tell you, all by itself, that's a drain. That's you trying to make sense out of what don't make no doggone sense in the world of child welfare. But if you balance both, it's not exactly a balance, but you want to develop more of the right brain by including these activities and many, many more to get that chemistry, which is your endorphins, your dopamines, and your serotonins. You bring more joy, you bring more positivity. You can see possibilities when things seem impossible. You can think outside the box instead of being tunnel vision and desperation, just trying to make stuff work. Does that make sense? When you hit the wall, you can say, what's the next best thing? That's where you want to be. So engage in these and let your therapeutic community bring more things to your life that allows you to live and enjoy those things. As a final thing, well, no, I got 2 things I want to do. Help me, Sarah. Tell me I got enough time for 2 things.
We have about 10 minutes left.
Good. I want to tell you to get a chime bowl for your meditation. And the reason I want you to get a chime bowl is because I don't want you to think you got to take time to meditate. You don't have to find that special place and sit in that lotus style. I can't stand that because my thighs don't like that. But you can sit in the chair, sit in the bed. And what you do with a chime bowl is that you just hit it, but with your eyes closed, you chase the tone and the vibration, and it's going to move further and further away from you. But if you chase it, watch this, listen. If you chase it, it's almost impossible for intrusive thoughts or other sounds to invade. And this one tone that I hit lasts less than 60 seconds. As a matter of fact, if you hit that 3 times, you probably spent barely 2 minutes. And that's all it takes to settle the mind. Some of my most intense people, like people who work with child fatalities all the time, and those things don't turn out well. Those agencies, they hook it up to the sound system just to quiet the mind, soothe the body, bring peace. So you consider that, and you could buy your own, or you could download it for free apps or Tibetan chime bowls on your cell phone, and just put your headphone in and enjoy that. So that being said, we're going to have a little debrief in a moment, but I want to give you one more further exercise that I really, really love. And I'm going to take this down. And I want to see, again, I want you to click on that little view box at the upper top and click on gallery so we can reconnect with each other again. And I want you to do a little mindfulness exercise with me just for a few minutes, and I'm going to rush this but I want you to know what the experience feels like. So I want you to, first of all, sit forward in your chair so that your butt is on the chair and your thighs are relatively free. Scoot forward and free your thighs. It's important to unconstrict your body. Take your arms off the armrests and lay them across your thighs so there's no constriction in your arm, and let your fingers hang between your thighs. And then I want you to imagine a string at the top of your head, pulling your head up so it lifts your trunk up out of your hips. That does not feel good. And lifts your neck up, your head up out of your neck and shoulders. That does not feel good because you can feel the strain in your spine. But I want you to inhale with your mouth like this, suck in air with me. That does not feel good, and blow out. Do it one more time. And as you blow out, sink back down into comfort. What I've asked you to just do is to align your spinal column, because we're often in a state of subluxation. I want to stretch that out a little bit so you get a flow. Now I want you to let your eyes roam around your space. Eyes wide open, and let your eyes land wherever they land, on the walls, your calendar, your light switch, your curtains. Just notice your space, be aware of your space, be connected with the tchotchkes on your desk, pictures. Just connect with your space, connect with the sounds in your house, creaking in the floor, ticking of the clock, soft sound of the furnace or the water tank, the birds outside the window, or a dog in the distance. Pay attention to the temperature. Just resting against your skin, your throat, your arms, your feet, whatever's bare, your ankles, around your face. Is it cool? Is it warm? Is it something you're going to adjust later? Now I want you to, if you will, close your eyes and go inside. And pay attention to the rhythm of your breath. Notice if it's shallow, if it's deep. There's nothing wrong, just notice what it is. Whatever the rhythm is okay. Notice the rising and falling of your abdomen. And now pay attention. But first find the beat of your heart. Notice the pulse in your chest, in your throat. Notice the pulse in your stomach. It's there. Notice it. Notice that pulse around your wrists and under your hands. Notice it. Under your feet and around your ankles. And notice too, there's a synchronicity between your heart beat and the rhythm of your breath. Don't try to fix it, just notice it. Now take a slight little short trip with me. I want you to see yourself standing on a path, trees on your right, and a stream on your left. But that path that you're standing in, you're barefoot in soft, moist, chocolatey soil. There's no obstruction under your feet. There's no roots, there's no rocks, just the softness of that warm, moist soil. I want you to squinch your toes into it. Gently rock your feet back and forth from heel to toe in that moist, warm soil. Feels so good. I want you to notice above the warmth of that sun cascading over you. It's so gentle, that warmth, but it's so perfect. As it cascades over your head, your shoulders, down your chest, resting on top of your feet in that soft, moist soil. Along with that warmth is the gentlest breeze coming from your right, bringing the fragrance of those trees and the florals and the grasses. This drifting over you, so lightly, complimenting that warmth of the sun and that softness under your feet and the fragrance of nature. Notice. And on your left, the sound of that stream as it rolls out to a larger body of water and rolls back in softly, creating subtle light little splashes as it hits little rocks. The rolling of that little stream, it's a little music, a little rhythm to it. It's enchanting, it's gentle, it's refreshing. Now I want you to embrace every sensation, the warmth of that sun above, gentle breeze embracing you, the softness, that moist, warm soil under your feet. Again, that fragrance of nature is so pure, so clean, it's enchanting, embracing. And the sound of that gentle stream moving out and moving back in, creating gentle little splashes. In your mind's eye, take a mental snapshot. Hold on to this enchantment, hold on to this serenity, hold on to this peace to bring back with you. And as you ease back, once again, notice the sounds in your room. Notice the temperature in your room. Notice the beat of your heart. And the rhythm of your breath. You're at peace. Perfect peace. And when you're ready, open your eyes and be back in your space. Some of you may want to stretch your head over so your left ear is on your left shoulder slowly, and stretch your head over the other direction so your right ear is over your right shoulder. Breathe deeply, loosen up the tension. Bring your head back to center, put it down, your chin in your chest. Slowly, slowly, but get a nice stretch at the nape of the neck. Raise your shoulders up to your ear. Stretch, 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 bringing up the diaphragm, and roll your shoulders back behind you. Open up your front, the lymphatics. Take a deep breath. Blow out. Lower your arms slowly back across your thighs. And welcome back. Guess what time it is? Debrief time. How was that? We want you can say how that is and put that in the chat box. But I want you to, in our debrief time together, Beth will call the time on this. I want you to think about, what are your takeaways from today? And when I talk about takeaways, what are you making a declaration that you're going to be doing different? Now, I know y'all came with some stuff, and sometimes stuff may have come back to your remembrance. You're going to dust it off and re-engage in it. Some people are going to add some new things to your repertoire called self-care, intentional self-care. And something just may be totally new to you. But what are you going to be doing? Don't tell me what you're going to try. Tell me what you're going to be doing. And let's just debrief for a moment. Beth, you could kind of lead the rest of this.
Yeah.
Type it in, type it in, type it in. And
Yeah, mostly what I want to remind people is that we'll be getting 2 evaluations, unfortunately, but we're really hoping that you'll do them both for us. One is one that Beverly Kyer and the work that she's doing goes towards the grant that she has. The other one is for us that will include a request for you to give us information about what other trainings you want. What else do you want to hear from Beverly? What do you want more of for us in this next fiscal year? So we really appreciate that, appreciate you attending, and anything that you can tell us about what your training needs are for next year. So I don't know about y'all, I'm in a bit of feel like I'm in a relaxed state a little bit here. It's pretty lovely.
I want to point out something. B said something that many of us need to hear. That I hope that's okay for me to share that, B, because you didn't put it on private. Yeah, I see your thumbs up. Her body felt uncomfortable being so still, but I think that means I need to practice more. And I want us to understand that too. When we're accustomed to being overactive with a lot of stimulation, it can be hard to settle down. It's almost scary for some of us to do that, untrusting, but that does mean, just what she said, that you need to practice it more. We need to learn to slow ourselves down. All of the best ancestral technologies in healthcare say to slow it down, quiet yourself. I even have issues with those of us, I don't do it anymore, that walk with headphones on your hike. Sometimes you need to take them bad boys off and listen to the breeze in the trees. Let's stop everything. So thank you for sharing that, B. That's right on point. Just take more time to do that. Let me see some other, if anybody want to speak out loud, just open up and shout out. But some of you, thank you. I got a lot of thank yous.
Yeah, a lot of thank yous. And if you need to leave, we really appreciate you coming.
Respect that. I'm just going to, we don't want to hold you up. Somebody said being more focused and balanced, being very, very intentional. Oh, making a list of unfinished business. Please get it out of your head, put it on paper. Stop being so cerebral. Practice it on a daily basis, more reflective and intentional. Oh, what I cannot finish today, it will be done tomorrow. Amen, Rivera. I really enjoyed the training.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. And unless somebody wants to share with coworkers. Yes. Please share. Please open up. Please, Vina, that is wisdom. Don't hold it. It serves you no purpose. It'll just eat you up. Put more Mona Lisa on my face. And I got that W.M. Chan. Yeah, put that on your face. And then when they're not around, then talk about it. Get that off your face and tell the truth about how you really feel. That's me being gracious when people are testing my grace, because I don't want the client to feel that I'm judging or disconnecting. But sometimes, particularly when people do things that are causing further injury to their children, I try to be present, but that's not completely what I feel. So I'm going to do that so I could keep the engaged and have the opportunity to help them come up with some different ways of being. But when that really disturbs me, I need to sit down with one of you. I need to talk to Jacqueline. I need to talk to Maria, Patricia, and say, you know what? I really had a hard time with that. I almost lost my professionalism. I need to does that make sense to you? So learn to be real. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much, Beverly, for being here. Beverly and Sarah and I are going to stay online. Thanks, Sally. Good to see you.
Y'all be safe. Y'all be well. Yes. Stay vigilant.
Yeah, Sarah, Beverly, Leah, and I will stay online to make sure we have all of the materials that we want to send out to you. We're going to do a little debrief, the 4 of us, but we invite you, if you wouldn't mind, to click the little leave button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. So thank you so much for attending. Good to see you, Maria. Good to see you, Lucy. Good to see all of you. So thanks so much.